Chapter 61. Several days later, Yunwu's sect officially changed its name to Zixia Sect's Mount Yunwu branch. As soon as she regained her freedom, Mo Tiange went down the mountain to see if second uncle was doing well and then told him about this matter. In the past few days, Yi Jiang had already understood everything. He only said to her, "Just concentrate on cultivating. You don't need to care about this kind of thing. As long as you can build your foundation, it doesn't matter which cultivation group you're in." In all fairness, Mo Tiange didn't have any feelings for cultivation groups. In the past 10 years, it was second uncle who took her to wander around, devoted himself to raising her. Yunwu's sect didn't do anything for her, and she didn't have too many feelings for Yunwu's sect either. In the entire celestial pole, or in the entire cultivation world, most people were this practical. Now that she was in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, she could already abstain from eating, so she simply stayed in her room to stabilize her cultivation level and study formations. She hadn't had time to study the Qimen Duanjia she obtained in Miwu Valley 2 years ago. Now was the perfect time to carefully study it. During the time she stayed in her room, the influence of the annexation of the sect became greater and greater. Zixia sect sent several core formation cultivators to take over. Now, there was no sect head of Yunwu sect, only the master of Mount Yunwu, and the master of this branch was precisely the core formation cultivator from Jiang clan. Of course, this didn't have much to do with Jiang Shangheng. He wasn't close to his sect and had a grudge against Jiang Qingxian. It was already good enough that he wasn't bullied, so how could he enjoy any special treatment? Apart from Jiang clan, none of the other core formation cultivators escaped this calamity. Even their clans were implicated. Moreover, most of the sect's disciples came from cultivation clans. Because of threats and promises, disciples died every day because of this, causing everyone to live in fear every day. Normally, the individual cultivators who entered the sect through the Immortals' assembly shouldn't be affected too much, but several disciples were implicated and died. Fortunately, Su Jingji wasn't among them. Later, Mo Tiange heard that Wang Qianyi married a junior of a core formation cultivator from Zixia sect and went to Zixia sect. Because of this, Wang clan was spared and was no longer investigated. Mo Tiange could only sigh about this. As a woman, her body was her last asset. Senior Marshal's sister Wang was a proud woman. Although her father was a foundation-building cultivator, she was never proud and always treated others kindly. But in the end, she couldn't protect herself. Mo Tiange recalled when she ran into Shenbing and Mo Tiange in Miwu Valley. Mo Tiange mentioned that she was verbally harassed by Shenbing. Although Shenbing was angry, she tolerated it, but Mo Tiange cursed at her. Mo Tiange also recalled that today, she was forced to marry the hedonistic son of a rich family she despised the most. She really had no control over her own fate. After a while, she heard that Shenbing was forced to become sect head Li's son's concubine. Senior sister Shenbing had always been famous for her beauty in the 3 sections. Many of the disciples of the 3 sects had fallen under her skirt. She was not surprised at all that she had fallen into such a situation. Beauty was wealth, but it was also a curse. If she hadn't disguised herself as a man and stopped showing her womanly side, she probably wouldn't have had a good ending today. Later. Yan's Mo Li's sect, Sex Yan, sect, Yan Yan as, Mo Xia Sex Li's cities well as she could. Mo, as she said, Mu's Mu. Qing, Mu as Qing, Mu. Apart from replying with a blessing summoning amulet, there was nothing else she could do. Several months later, the storm of annexing the 2 sects gradually subsided. When Mo Tiange came out of her room and saw the 3 of them in the small living room, she couldn't help but feel a bit surprised. "What's going on?" Lu Yidao beckoned her over. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, come over and let's have a chat." Filled with questions, he walked over and found a chair to sit on. Mo Tiange really didn't believe she was fine. Lu Yidao and Su Jingji were extroverted, so it was normal for them to gather and chat when they had nothing to do. However, she never left his room unless he had something to do. The reason he stayed outside was either because he had something to do or because he was interested in a topic. Lu Dao excitedly asked, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you still don't know about the news that just came out, right? What news? Lu Dao mysteriously paused for a moment before continuing, news about foundation building pills. Ah. Mo Tiange almost forgot about this matter. After the sect's extermination, she also forgot about the minor competition that was supposed to be held several months ago. What's wrong? Are they going to hold the minor competition again? Lu Dao shook his head, feeling extremely excited. I heard that in order to appease the sect's disciples, they're going to increase the distribution of foundation building pills and change the method of distribution. Method? What method? Are we not going to hold the minor competition anymore? Lu Dao nodded. Yes, the minor competition this time is cancelled. Mo Tiange didn't understand. Then what method are they going to use? Su Jingji, who had been silent the whole time, coldly snorted and said, Isn't it because too many people died this time? If we hold the minor competition, it'll be too cold and cheerless, so they're changing the method. Su Jingji's mood had always been bad. Although their Su clan wasn't implicated, they weren't having a good time either. Su Jingji originally had an uncle in the foundation building realm, but because he was close to sect head Fang, he was demoted back to the clan. Fortunately, he expressed his stance quickly, so he didn't implicate other people. Coupled with Shen Bing's and Wang Qinyi's experiences, Su Jingji, who was also a descendant of a cultivation clan, was filled with hatred. Upon seeing his reaction, Qin Shi coughed and said, Junior Marshal Brother Su, it's better for you to calm down a bit. No matter what happened in the past, Zixia sect is hanging over our heads now. Su Jingji's expression stiffened, but in the end, he still agreed. How could he not know this? However, his life had been smooth ever since he was a child. Aside from the Immortals' Assembly, he had never encountered such a depressing matter, so he didn't hide his emotions. Lu Dao felt very embarrassed after being interrupted. Su Jingji's mood wasn't right, yet he was so excited. He immediately restrained his emotions and said, I heard the demonic beasts in the depths of Kunwu mountain range are getting restless again, and the small demonic beasts in the vicinity are also frequently injuring people. Therefore, the sect has decided to reward us according to the number of demonic beasts we catch in Mount Yunwu within a day. The first few dozen disciples will be qualified to receive foundation building pills. Is that so? Mo Tiange frowned. In the depths of the south of Kunwu was a dense forest that stretched as far as the eye could see. Reportedly, there were many high-level demonic beasts there, but in the vicinity of the sect, there were generally only first and second-rank demonic beasts. The first rank was equivalent to the aura refining realm, while the second rank was equivalent to the early stage of the foundation building realm. As long as aura refining disciples were careful, they could deal with first-rank demonic beasts. As for second-rank demonic beasts, although it was a bit difficult, demonic beasts didn't know how to use talismans and didn't know many spells, so they could still be killed if many people ganged up on them. Even if they couldn't kill them, they could still run away. However, although this method sounded good, it wasn't like the minor competition where even if they were strong enough, one of them would meet a tragic end if they met a similar opponent. But after careful consideration, it was actually a preferential treatment for cultivation clans because they had a lot of manpower. When the time came, they could concentrate on one person and obtain a foundation building pill. As for the other disciples, who would be willing to sacrifice themselves for others? After all, if there were spoils of war, there would be rewards. Can we go together? Lu Dao shook his head. This time, we won't be competing in Miwu Valley. Disciples will be competing with each other. Of course, if we run into each other inside, we'll presumably be allowed to move together. However, the chances of that happening are really low. The mountain forest is too big. Mo Tiange was calculating in her heart. This method had both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that she didn't need to be afraid of being seen by others, so she could just use whatever methods she had. The disadvantage was that she had to be extra careful. After all, if she wasn't careful when fighting demonic beasts, she might end up dying in their mouths. Chapter 62. The vast forest stretched as far as the eye could see. It was verdant and lush, stretching for thousands of miles. Mo Tiange stood on top of a high cliff, silently watching. This was the southern end of Kunwu mountain range, a part of the forest. Countless demonic beasts lived here. Some were tamed by cultivators and became spiritual beasts, but most of them lived freely in this forest, cultivating and taking human forms. It was said that in the innermost part of the forest, near the sea, lived many demonic beasts that had already taken human forms. They generally didn't go out of the forest, but every once in a while, they couldn't help but want to order low-level demonic beasts to attack and occupy the areas where human cultivators lived. Of course, they couldn't occupy those areas under normal circumstances. However, they could obtain a lot of medicinal pills to help their cultivation every time they came here, so they were very happy. Every time this happened, it was a gamble. Sometimes the human cultivators suffered heavy losses, but sometimes they obtained a lot of good demonic beast corpses to be used as tool refining materials. Mo Tiange had never encountered this kind of situation. She was only a low-level cultivator and had only been in Kunwu for 10 years. The last time she fought against demonic beasts was at least 50 or 60 years ago. Standing on this high cliff with her were a core formation cultivator, more than 10 foundation building cultivators, and several hundred aura refining cultivators. The consequences of Zixia sect annexing Yunwu's sect could already be seen. In the last minor competition, Yunwu's sect had more than 400 disciples in the 7th layer or above, but now, there were probably less than 300, maybe even fewer. Among these cultivators, Mo Tiange didn't see many familiar figures. Senior Martial Brother Zhou didn't come because, with his cultivation level in the 11th layer of the aura refining realm, he would definitely get a share of the foundation building pills. Since the sect had just suffered a disaster, he didn't want to attract attention, so he simply didn't participate. Wang Qianyi and Shen Bing also didn't come. The two of them went to Zixia sect's main branch, and it was said that they had already decided to get a share of the foundation building pills. Because of this, Mo Tiange felt a little better. At least the two of them weren't making unnecessary sacrifices. Muro Mian, on the other hand, came. She looked pale and skinny, standing alone in the crowd. Her face was expressionless, and her original beauty was completely gone. Seeing her appearance, Mo Tiange sighed in her heart. This was also good. At least, she wouldn't follow in Wang Qianyi and Shen Bing's footsteps. Not long after, another group of people flew over from the horizon and landed on this flat cliff. They were Jin Dao School's disciples. Just like Yunwu's sect, although they didn't change the color of their clothes, they added the symbol of Zixia sect. At a rough glance, there were only about 100 Jin Dao School disciples. Apparently, they had also gone through a purge. Everyone had a distracted expression on their faces. Fighting over foundation building pills was something like that, yet none of them looked excited. Obviously, what they saw was even more miserable than what Yunwu's sect's disciples experienced. The core formation cultivator leading them was a Taoist priest dressed in secular clothes. Because of this, Mo Tiange stared at him a few more times. Although the righteous cultivators in the immortal cultivation world all practiced Tao techniques, many of them dressed as Taoists, which was different from the secular world. Most of the Taoists in the secular world wore cyan or dark blue buttoned robes, which were thick and heavy without any sense of hierarchy. Taoist robes in the cultivation world, on the other hand, were mostly beautified. Dark blue robes, buttoned robes, and plain robes were layered with innate trigrams and taiji cloud patterns. Their colors were also distinguished, making them look elegant yet dignified. Compared to the Taoists in the secular world, Taoists appeared even more elegant and graceful. Therefore, they rarely wore secular Taoist robes because they couldn't show the temperament of cultivators. The Taoist in front of her was obviously a core formation cultivator, but he didn't care about what he wore at all. It was obvious that he had a firm Tao heart. Once this person arrived, the current branch master of Yunwu Mountain greeted him enthusiastically. "Senior Martial Brother Lin, long time no see." This Taoist didn't give him any face. He only let out a soft humph, then closed his eyes to rest. Branch Master Jiang was snubbed, so he looked a little embarrassed. Mo Tiange saw that some of the Yunwu sect disciples, such as Su Jingji, were secretly pleased. Jiang Shangheng, on the other hand, looked annoyed. It seemed he couldn't bear to see his elder's behavior. He stared at a cultivator next to Branch Master Jiang, hatred flashing across his face. Mo Tiange realized that person was Jiang Qingxian, a disciple of Jiang clan who once bullied her. This Jiang Qingxian seemed to be Branch Master Jiang's direct descendant. He always followed Branch Master Jiang, and there was a complacent expression on his face. Although Mo Tiange wasn't close to Jiang Shangheng, upon seeing this scene, she still somewhat despised Jiang Qingxian. He was a hedonistic son of a rich family who relied on his blood relationship with his elder to commit outrages. He didn't concentrate on cultivating and didn't have any real skills. It was no wonder Jiang Shangheng didn't like him. After a while, another group of people flew over from the horizon. The number of people was much more than the number of their two groups. They were Zixia sect's disciples. The cultivator who led Zixia sect's group was rather good-natured. He was also indifferent to Branch Master Jiang, but he was very polite to that Taoist. After the three of them talked for a while, they each used their magic weapons. In an instant, a transporting formation appeared out of thin air. It seemed to be the same technique as the one in Miwu Valley. Presumably, it had been used to test the disciples before. All disciples, go in one by one. No pushing. After experiencing the calamity that befell their sect, the disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school were naturally quiet. On the other hand, Zixia sect's disciples were beaming with joy and rushed to go in first. The disciples of the other two groups also didn't care and just waited. Mo Tiange looked left and right. Among her fellow martial brothers, Lui Dao was itching to try, Su Jingji had a calm expression, Qin Shi still had a calm expression, and Jiang Shangheng had a deep frown on his face. She touched her face and felt that it was a bit stiff, so she slowed down her breathing and adjusted her mentality. She was determined to obtain the foundation building pill. In the future, if she couldn't stand Zixia sect's way of doing things, she could find an excuse to leave the mountain and never come back. Zixia sect didn't have time to care about a low-level disciple. Before that, it would be best if she could obtain the foundation building pill in the sect and build her foundation. Otherwise, with only her aura refining cultivation level and second uncle's lifespan approaching its end, she wouldn't dare to casually leave. As her imagination ran wild, she suddenly noticed that Su Jingji, who was the closest to her, seemed to be trembling. Mo Tiange called out in a low voice, "Senior Martial Brother Su." Su Jingji turned his head. His face was so pale that he was sweating profusely. His voice was also trembling slightly. Mo Tiange sighed. "We haven't gone in yet. Don't collapse." Upon hearing what she said, Su Jingji hastily wiped his sweat and pretended that nothing had happened. "Junior Martial Brother Yi doesn't need to worry." "Even if I worry, I won't be able to," Mo Tiange said. "You have to be alert. This forest is very dangerous, and we can't travel together." Su Jingji nodded. After a long time, he seemed to still be in a bad mood. He whispered to her, "Junior Martial Brother Yi, I'm really worried. Our three groups obviously have a grudge against each other. If we go into the forest like this, won't there be some kind of conflict?" Mo Tiange was puzzled. "Why?" Su Jingji was silent for a long time. All of a sudden, he said through clenched teeth, "If I run into that Jiang Qingxian, if I can clean him up, I'll..." A fierce look flashed across his face. She knew what he meant. Mo Tiange was startled. She turned her head around and saw that no one was paying attention to them. She then said in a low voice, "Senior Martial Brother Su, you mustn't talk nonsense. You're too nervous." Su Jingji closed his eyes and nodded. He then wiped the sweat on his face and said, "Junior Martial Brother Yi is right." Right after he said that, he closed his eyes to rest, adjusting his breath and calming his mind. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then took out something from inside her robe and handed it to him. Senior Marshal Brother Su, this is a heart-calming talisman. If you can't control yourself, just stick it on your body. Su Jingji opened his eyes. Without saying anything, he accepted the talisman and said, "Thank you, Junior Marshal Brother Yi." Mo Tiange smiled. She no longer said anything and just stared at the transporting formation. In just a short while, almost all the Zixia sect disciples had left. She composed herself, then walked towards the transporting formation. Chapter 63. The transporting formation shone brightly. Without any hesitation, Mo Tiange slapped a defensive talisman on her body. This time, it was different from Miwu Valley. No matter what, Miwu Valley had been dealt with by the seniors of the 3 sections. Although there were still demonic beasts, there were only a few left. Moreover, there were some restrictions set up in the valley. As long as the disciples had the medallions, they wouldn't die. But in this forest, it was hard to say. If they really teleported to the front of the demonic beasts and got bitten, it would be fatal. Moreover, there was a turbulent undercurrent between the disciples of the 3 sections. In addition, there were some people who would forget what was right for the sake of profit. They might really lose their lives. Because she'd long anticipated that this trip would definitely be dangerous, she deliberately used some things to exchange with Qin Shi for some talismans. A while ago, Qin Shi had been practicing drawing talismans. Although he lost a lot of his talismans, he also made quite a few finished ones. Since he didn't like them, he said he had a lot left, so the other 3 people exchanged a lot of talismans with him. Mo Tiange didn't have many spirit stones left, so she used some materials to exchange with him. He didn't really care because he dabbled in both pill concocting and tool refining, so he accepted everything she offered. Mo Tiange was somewhat worried about preparing for the trial this time. She wasn't a wealthy cultivator, and all the spirit stones she needed for cultivation were obtained through rewards or transactions. Unfortunately, she didn't have a good aptitude, so the amount of spirit stones she needed to cultivate was quite a lot. It turned out that second uncle had sold his own belongings to prepare talismans and pills for her during the minor competition of the 3 sects. She really didn't have any other belongings. There were only about 100 or so spirit stones left, which were reserved for laying formations. There were also some spiritual plants, spiritual objects, and other materials, but most of them had already been exchanged for spirit stones, so the remaining ones couldn't be sold for much money. There were also too few talismans, so they couldn't be exchanged for spirit stones. In addition, there were a bunch of unknown things. Some of them were recognized by Qin Shi, so he exchanged them for talismans. As for the rest, he didn't know what they were. She remembered that she had obtained a bead from the man of the Yin clan. It was about the size of a child's fist. She could feel the surging spiritual qi in it, but no one could recognize what it was. In this way, only the spiritual weapons were still valuable. Most of them were obtained from the man from the Yin clan 3 years ago, so she didn't dare to sell them. However, this wasn't something she needed to worry about right now. At the very least, she had made sufficient preparations for this test. Once she was transported into the forest, Mo Tiange immediately looked around. Fortunately, he didn't encounter any demonic beasts. She heaved a sigh of relief and took a step forward. The next moment, she missed her footing and fell straight down. She hurriedly used the light body technique, found a foothold, and leaped up. This was a steep slope. Because there were too many vines, it looked like solid ground in front, but it was actually just vines attached to it. She slapped her forehead. It was really a false alarm. She had observed the surroundings but had forgotten to look under her feet. It seemed that she would have to pay more attention in the future. He was surrounded by dense trees and vines that crawled everywhere. Beneath his feet was a thick layer of dried leaves. It was very difficult to find a path. From inside her robe, Mo Tiange took out a jade slip engraved with a map of this place. However, this map was too rough, and there was no reference nearby, so she simply couldn't find it. She could only give up. She carefully restrained her breath, took out her greenwood sword, and walked through the forest. There was an advantage to being here, and that was that she cultivated a wood-attributed cultivation technique. In this forest, the wood chi was dense, and the power of her cultivation technique would be even greater. Suddenly, she felt a spiritual aura movement behind her. Mo Tiange, who had been observing her surroundings attentively, immediately moved. She blocked with her greenwood sword and turned around to see her opponent. It was actually a brightly colored flat-headed demonic snake. In an instant, her hair stood on end. Even though she considered herself bold, she really wanted to vomit when facing such a snake. But now wasn't the time to vomit. This demonic snake's breath wasn't weak. If she didn't concentrate and died under its mouth, it would be even more disgusting. This snake was more than 10 feet long, as thick as the mouth of a bull, with a flat head and a thin tongue. Its cold and gloomy eyes were directly staring at her. Judging from the breath it emitted, it was a first-rank demonic beast. In an instant, the snake jumped up and spat black venom towards her. At this time, the defensive talisman on her body took effect. The venom fell off before it could touch her body. After this attack, the defensive barrier on her body shook and was about to break. Mo Tiange didn't dare to be careless, so she took out another defensive talisman and slapped it on her body. Then she took out her greenwood sword and attacked the snake's weak point. This demonic snake was very agile. It moved as fast as lightning. As it stretched and shrank, it tangled with greenwood sword. Mo Tiange carefully controlled greenwood sword while taking out a handful of seeds from her chinkuan bag. Taking advantage of the fact that the snake was tangled with greenwood sword, she threw them out. The seeds fell on the snake's body. One by one, they grew into fire thorns, firmly entangling the demonic snake. She calmed down a little, but in the next second, she was so surprised that she almost shouted. The demonic snake stretched and shrank its body. The fire thorns entangling its body couldn't pierce its skin at all. Instead, it swung its tail and sent the thorns flying. Mo Tiange's expression turned grave. The scales on this snake's skin were unexpectedly so hard that the thorns of the fire thorns couldn't pierce through. The demonic snake dodged greenwood sword and suddenly turned its head towards her. The tip of its tongue spat out wasn't venom, but fog. Mo Tiange felt dizzy. She was shocked. This must be poisonous fog. She didn't dare to be careless. While holding her breath, she took out a medicinal pill from her chinkuan bag and threw it into her mouth. As the medicinal power of the refreshing pill spread, her mind immediately became clear. She didn't dare to continue entangling with the snake, so she took out a talisman and threw it at the snake's body. A pillar of water soared into the sky and poured on the snake's body. Soon after, it froze into ice, and the demonic snake's body immediately slowed down. Greenwood sword stabbed down. With a pu sound, the sword finally pierced through its scales and firmly nailed it 7 inches from its head. The demonic snake twisted a few times, but it couldn't break free from the ice or the greenwood sword. In the end, it stopped breathing and stopped moving. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. She retrieved her greenwood sword and carefully wiped it clean. She regretfully looked at the ice on the demonic snake's body. This freezing talisman wasn't cheap. This forest was really dangerous everywhere. It was only a snake, but it actually put her in such a dangerous situation and even made her use an freezing talisman. Facing the snake's corpse on the ground, Mo Tiange was in a dilemma. During this trial, the elders of the school clearly told her to bring back the demonic beast's corpse. However, this snake looked really disgusting, so she couldn't do anything about it. After hesitating for a while, she took out a leather pouch from her chinkuan bag. With a flick of her greenwood sword, she picked up the snake's corpse, fastened the mouth of the pouch, and threw it into her chinkuan bag. Once she finished doing all this, she once again restrained her breath, carefully identified her direction and went out of this forest. In the dense forest, a clear brook flowed through an open space in the forest, meandering downwards. Under the nourishment of this brook, the grassland on both sides was lush and the wildflowers were brilliant. It was indeed a beautiful scene in the wilderness. However, in this beautiful scene, there were two people who ruined it. One of them was wearing purple robes, and the other was wearing yellow robes. Their cuffs were embroidered with the same symbol. The two of them fiercely glared at each other. The purple-robed youth snorted and said angrily, "Jindao School's disciple, you actually dared to mount a sneak attack on me?" The yellow-robed middle-aged cultivator's expression didn't change. He said faintly, "Yellow-haired brat, so what if I mount a sneak attack on you?" Angered by his unmoved attitude, the youth's face twisted. I'm a disciple of Zixia sect's main branch. Aren't you afraid of being punished by your school?" The middle-aged cultivator smiled faintly. "If I did everything cleanly, who would be able to trace it back to me?" "You." The youth was seething with anger. Presumably, he didn't have enough experience and hadn't experienced any setbacks in his cultivation, so he was easily provoked. He immediately manipulated the spirit tool in his hand and rushed towards the middle-aged cultivator. The middle-aged cultivator cautiously took a step back. While manipulating the spirit tool, he secretly took out a talisman. Both of them were in the 10th layer. For a moment, they were evenly matched as they fought back and forth. Right at this moment, another person came out of the forest. This time, he was wearing black robes. When he saw the two people fighting, his expression changed. After a long time, he finally took out an object from his chinkuan bag and threw it towards one of them. Following the sound of the brook, several spiritual aura fluctuations attracted her attention. She carefully hid her tracks and walked towards the place where the fight was taking place. On the meadow beside the brook, two disciples from Zixia sect and Jindao school were fighting. In the corner of the forest, a Yunwu sect disciple with a ferocious expression threw the spirit tool in his hand. "Ah!" With a blood-curdling scream, that Zixia sect disciple lay in a pool of blood, no longer breathing. The disciples of Jindao school and Yunwu sect both heaved sighs of relief. The two of them didn't fight or talk. They just divided the Zixia sect disciple's belongings, burned his corpse with a fire, and then went their separate ways. Mo Tiange hid herself in the forest, drenched in cold sweat. What Su Jingji was worried about finally happened. The disciples of Jindao school and Yunwu sect, who harbored hatred in their hearts, killed the lone Zixia sect disciple to vent their hatred. She could imagine what would happen next. Those who killed Zixia sect disciples couldn't help but attack again. If they attacked too many times, Zixia sect disciples would discover that their fellow disciples were killed. In their anger, they would retaliate against the two groups. The disciples of the three groups would then fight each other, resulting in countless casualties. This trial was indeed full of dangers. Not only did she have to guard against the demonic beasts in the forest, but she also had to worry about other cultivators. After spending a long time to calm down, Mo Tiange once again set foot on the road. Even if she was worried, it was useless. She could only carefully avoid them because the formation at the exit would only open after one day, and she was determined to obtain the foundation building pill. Chapter 64. Once she found the stream, Mo Tiange could finally distinguish her position on the map. Then, in order to deliberately avoid others, she carefully studied a route. Fortunately, the information stated roughly what was in each place, and each disciple had a copy of the map. By finding a place that no one liked, she could naturally avoid most people. If someone was unlucky enough to be teleported to that place, he or she would probably leave. The place she found was dangerous in the eyes of ordinary people. There were cliffs, abysses, and a poisonous spring that emitted poisonous fog all year round. The map indicated that this place wasn't good. It wasn't easy to walk, and there weren't any demonic beasts that were easy to kill. However, there were some demonic monkeys that lived in groups, which were quite troublesome. Mo Tiange thought about it. It wasn't easy to walk, so she just had to be careful. After all, she wasn't an ordinary person, so she wouldn't encounter any accidents. As for those demonic monkeys that lived in groups, they were suitable for her. She was good at formations, and first-rank demonic beasts couldn't recognize them. She just needed to find a suitable place to lay a disorienting formation and lure the monkeys inside. Then, she wouldn't be afraid no matter how many monkeys there were. After making up her mind, she walked smoothly. Although her breath-concealing technique wasn't brilliant, the divine sense of an aura-refining cultivator wasn't strong, so very few people could detect her. Soon, she arrived at the place indicated on the map. Mo Tiange took a look and unconsciously frowned. This place was indeed as the information said. It was a disgusting place. Probably because of the poisonous spring, there was poisonous fog as soon as she approached. The shrubs were so dense that there wasn't even a path, and most of them were poisonous. It was obviously daytime, but this place was gray and overcast. She couldn't see the sky at all. Without a better choice, Mo Tiange could only brace herself and go. After sweeping this area with her divine sense, she had a general understanding of the terrain and also found the position of the demonic monkeys. There were many faint spiritual aura fluctuations on the edge of the poisonous spring. The divine sense of an aura-refining cultivator wasn't strong, so it was difficult to sense the spiritual aura fluctuations of a single low-ranked demonic beast. However, when they gathered together, it was very easy to distinguish them. She swallowed a refreshing pill to prevent the poisonous fog from affecting her. Then, she laid a simple disorienting formation and a spirit-trapping formation in a place that wasn't too far from her. As its name suggested, the spirit-trapping formation's main function was to make people lose their way. Once they entered the formation, they would keep walking in circles and couldn't get out. The spirit-trapping formation's purpose was to deal with people or beasts with spiritual aura. Once they entered the formation, their spiritual aura would run slower. Generally, this formation would be placed in cultivators' caves to prevent others from breaking in. These two formations were not enough. After thinking for a while, she set up another 5 elements life and death formation. This formation was more troublesome than the previous two, but she had been studying the formation book some time ago and had modified this formation. It could be used for both offense and defense, so it was safer to use it. After Moge's spiritual aura state, she adjusted it, she to defend. An attack. To be. She. And to Mo, she to. To, she, to. She to, she. Mo, and to her. She to, into to her to the spirit. With. Mo spirit to Mo demon. First-rank demonic beasts weren't much smarter than ordinary beasts. They didn't know how to think and acted according to their instincts. Soon, their figures appeared in the poisonous fog. Sensing the sudden provocative aura, these demonic monkeys pounced towards Mo Tiange's location without the slightest hesitation. However, before they could even get close to her, they began to run in circles. The group of monkeys formed a circle and chased each other, running in circles from head to tail. It looked interesting, but Mo Tiange didn't dare to be careless. She waved the formation flag in her hand. The formation was instantly filled with quicksand and fire. The group of monkeys squeaked. They ran left and right, but they couldn't escape no matter how hard they tried. They were burned by the fire, so they ran and trampled on each other. Mo Tiange waved the formation flag again. Many stones fell from the formation. The group of monkeys had nowhere to hide and died under the stones. Mo Tiange breathed a sigh of relief when all the demonic monkeys were killed. Aura-refining cultivators wouldn't be able to deal with so many first-rank demonic beasts if they hadn't set traps in advance. Although they were successfully killed, she still spent a lot of spiritual aura. The ability of aura-refining cultivators was too low. They couldn't use multiple spirit tools at the same time, nor could they maintain a fight of magical power for a long time. Even magic weapons without cultivation level restrictions couldn't display much of their power. The more she cultivated, the more eager she was to build her foundation. After recovering her spiritual aura, Mo Tiange stood up and cleaned up the mess. There were about 20 to 30 monkeys in the group just now. Presumably, there would be a chaotic fight in this mountain forest, so the number of demonic beasts they killed wouldn't be many. These demonic beasts were enough to exchange for a foundation-building pill. Therefore, after stuffing the corpses of the demonic monkeys into her Qiankuan bag, she sat in the formation and meditated. She didn't plan to kill any more demonic beasts. Her goal was only to obtain a foundation-building pill. She didn't want to lose her life, nor did she want to be in the limelight. While she was meditating leisurely, a monstrous wave was set off in this mountain forest. The first Zixia sect disciple who was killed wasn't discovered, but it wasn't just one or two people who had this idea. Soon, other people also made their moves. Zixia sect disciples were numerous and powerful. They also felt that these two groups were exterminated, so how could they be willing to give up? By the afternoon, the fight had already been brought to the surface. Although the total number of Yunwu sect and Jindao school's disciples wasn't as many as Zixia sect's disciples, they harbored hatred in their hearts. Moreover, they usually launched sneak attacks and succeeded quite a few times. However, when Zixia sect disciples finally reacted, both sides began to have victories and defeats. As more and more people were killed, they basically didn't care about anything else and started fighting as soon as they saw each other. Mo Tiange didn't know any of this. Fortunately, she came to this place. Otherwise, she would have probably also been involved in the fight. The sky gradually darkened, but Mo Tiange didn't do anything. She just sat in the middle of the formation. She couldn't light the lamp or it would attract other people. Even if she didn't attract other people, it wouldn't be good to fight at night if some demonic beast came. In any case, she could still see a little. She only needed to endure this night because the exit formation would be open tomorrow. Suddenly, she wrinkled her brows and raised her head. Spiritual aura fluctuations were coming from outside. Someone seemed to be coming here. After pondering for a moment, she slightly tidied up the formation she laid, leaving behind the 5 elements life and death formation. She then hid herself and carefully paid attention to that person. That person stumbled as he ran. His steps were weak and he fell from time to time, but he still managed to run all the way to this place. But all of a sudden, he seemed to bump into something. With a bang, there was no sound. Even after a long time, she still couldn't hear any sound. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then came out of her hiding place and cautiously felt her way over. She had always been cautious. Now that she had a defensive spell on her body and greenwood sword in her hand, she could deal with this person even if he suddenly launched an attack. Therefore, she decided to go and take a look. Not far from her, there was a person lying motionless on the ground. The sky was too dark, so she couldn't see him clearly. She could only vaguely see that he was wearing black clothes. Mo Tiange felt a bit relieved. She went over to take a look. Sure enough, it was a young Yunwu sect disciple. Senior Martial Brother, Senior Martial Brother. She gently pushed the person. After a long time, the person finally reacted. He raised his head with difficulty and said in a low voice, "Junior Martial Sister, help me." Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. Junior Martial Sister? Before she could think of anything, the person's head tilted to one side and he fainted again. After thinking for a moment, she still helped the person into the formation she laid. She didn't know this person. Yunwu's sect had so many aura-refining disciples, but she only knew a few of them. Even the people in the other rooms in the courtyard only looked familiar to her, so she didn't remember this person at all. However, since they were both Yunwu's sect disciples and there wasn't any trouble, she could lend him a hand. She then inserted her spiritual aura into the person's body to examine his injuries. After circulating her spiritual aura through the person's meridians, Mo Tiange felt a bit relieved. The injuries on his body were very serious, but his meridians weren't damaged, so it was actually easy. After thinking for a moment, she took out medicinal pills from inside her robe and fed him a refreshing pill to prevent the poisonous fog from entering his body. She then fed him an aura-nourishing pill. A refreshing pill was only an ordinary antidote pill, it wasn't a precious medicine. As for healing medicinal pills, she did have small reversion pills on her, but they were expensive. Even foundation-building cultivators could use them. Giving them to an aura-refining cultivator she didn't know would be a bit wasteful. Besides, she didn't know this person at all, so giving him something precious was a bit too kind. Kindness had to be done appropriately to make people feel grateful and not greedy. This was the principle's second uncle taught her. Not long after, the man groaned and seemed to have woken up. Enchanting said, "Senior Marshal brother, are you feeling better?" The person opened his eyes, struggled to sit up and forced a smile. "Junior Marshal brother. Thank you. If I didn't run into you, I would have lost my life today." Enchanting said faintly, "Senior Marshal brother, you don't have to be so polite. It was nothing." The person nodded and took out a jade bottle from inside his robe. After swallowing several medicinal pills, he handed the jade bottle to Enchanting. "I don't dare to let Junior Marshal brother suffer any losses." Enchanting didn't stand on ceremony and took the bottle. This was also a rule in the cultivation world. First, no one was willing to help others and lose their belongings. Second, people who received favors from others didn't want to owe them favors. Upon seeing her taking the bottle, the person asked, "Junior Marshal brother, where is this place? Is it safe?" Enchanting said, "This is the poisonous spring in the northwest." The person must have known about this place, so he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. "That's good. Presumably, no one will come here." After a pause, he greeted her again. "I'm Murong. May I ask how I should address Junior Marshal brother?" Since he said, "I am," instead of "I'm," he was obviously a well-known figure among aura-refining disciples. Enchanting had indeed heard of this name before. Murong was the disciple who persisted until the end with Senior Marshal brother Zhou and the others in Miwu Valley's trial 2 years ago. At the same time, he was also Murong Yan's clan brother. Together with her, he became a disciple of the foundation-building cultivator Lin Qingwan. He was the Senior Marshal brother Murong Yan mentioned who guarded the medicinal garden and provided seeds. This Senior Marshal brother was indeed quite famous among the aura-refining disciples. Because she and Murong Yan could be considered friends, Enchanting was a bit polite. "So it's Senior Marshal brother Murong. My name is Yi Xiaotian. I'm an old acquaintance of Senior Marshal sister Murong." Murong let out a soft, "Ah," then said, "So it's you. I heard Xiaoyan mention you before." He looked her up and down then revealed a smile. "No wonder I thought you were a Junior Marshal sister in a daze just now." Enchanting originally had doubts, so she naturally asked, "Why is that?" Murong pursed his lips and said with a smile, "Because Xiaoyan said it's a pity you're a man. Your figure and appearance are more suitable to be a woman." Enchanting was instantly speechless. Aside from Su Jingji, Murong Yan also liked to tease her. She said she was thin and small and had a girlish appearance, so it would be good if she was a woman and so on. When she thought of Murong Yan, she couldn't help but sigh. The Murong Yan who loved to laugh and play around had already disappeared. Murong noticed something was wrong with her expression and thought she didn't like people saying she had a girlish appearance, so he changed the topic. "Junior Marshal brother Yi, did you meet anyone from Zixia sect here?" Enchanting shook her head. "No." Judging from Murong expression, something seemed to have happened, so she asked, "Did Senior Marshal brother Murong encounter something?" This question made Murong sigh. He then said, "Junior Marshal brother Yi, you've always been here, so you probably don't know the disciples of the 3 groups have already started fighting." In fact, Enchanting had long foreseen this, but she didn't say it out loud and just pretended she didn't know. "Really? What's going on?" "I don't know how it started. At first, it was just a private fight, but later on, it turned into a chaotic fight. We joined forces with Jindao School and were already fighting against Zixia sect. Originally, I didn't want to get involved, but as long as I ran into people from Zixia sect, they would take the initiative to attack me. I had no choice but to protect myself. Just now, I was killing a demonic wolf, but I was sneak attacked by someone. It wasn't easy for me to escape." Speaking up to this point, he had a worried expression on his face. It's so chaotic now. I don't know how Xiaoyan is doing. She used to always be lazy, so fights of magical power are really. Upon hearing what he said, Mo Tiange also felt a bit worried. Although Lu Yidao and Qin Shi were experienced in fights of magical power, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. Su Jingji's cultivation level was also ordinary. Although he was a descendant of a cultivation clan and definitely had several treasures, it was hard to say if he encountered a strong enemy. Murong Yen was the most worrisome. She never liked cultivating, and the reason her cultivation level was so high was all because she ate medicinal pills. Her own abilities were really mediocre. The 2 of them looked at each other in silence for a while. Murong Zi forced himself to smile. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I'll take advantage of you. Let me stay here too. My injuries really can't be healed in a short time, Mo Tiange nodded. This place isn't mine, anyone can come here. Senior Marshal Brother Murong doesn't need to be polite. Murong Zi smiled, then began to meditate to heal his injuries. This place was very dangerous, so it was better for him to recover his spiritual aura as soon as possible. Chapter 65. Inside the poisonous fog, Mo Tiange and Murong Zi were meditating quietly. Their surroundings were quiet. This was a rare moment of peace in this mountain forest. Aside from this, battles were also going on in different places. Although this mountain forest was vast, there were always people who ran into each other. If one of the parties was Zixia sect, it would lead to a chaotic battle. Some people killed, and some people were killed. At night, for safety's sake and to vent their anger, the disciples from both sides gathered together to search for opponents who were alone and kill them to prevent themselves from being killed. Murong Zi seized the time to heal his injuries and restore his spiritual aura, while Mo Tiange was secretly on guard. Unlike her fellow disciples who came from cultivation clans and harbored hatred towards Zixia sect, she didn't want to get involved in any disputes. She just wanted to quietly wait for the exit formation to open and exchange it for a foundation-building pill. Suddenly, she sensed a spiritual aura fluctuation in the air. Mo Tiange opened her eyes. Just as she was about to look at the poisonous spring behind her, she suddenly felt a gust of wind. She promptly pushed Murong Zi away and rolled to the side. Her cautiousness saved 2 lives. In the next moment, the 2 of them widened their eyes and stared at the thing in front of them in astonishment. This demonic beast had a flat head, sharp teeth, and a bulging back like a small mountain. Its lower body was still in the poisonous spring, but the part that was exposed was enough for them to recognize what kind of demonic beast it was. Murong Zi muttered, "Second-rank demonic beast, iron-teethed crocodile. Turns out there really is a second-rank demonic beast here." Mo Tiange pulled him back and waved her hand, summoning formation flags. The place they were originally meditating was the 5 elements life and death formation she laid. As soon as the iron-teethed crocodile attacked, it entered the formation. Senior Marshal Brother Murong, what's this? Murong Zi regained his composure and said with a frown, "This is a second-rank demonic beast, equivalent to an early-stage foundation-building cultivator. We're no match for it." Before they could say anything else, the iron-teethed crocodile dashed forward and opened its mouth to bite them. The 2 of them hastily retreated. Mo Tiange waved the formation flags, and the formation discs and flags she hid underground instantly stood up. The 5 elements life and death formation began to operate. The things around its body stood up with a paw sound. The iron-teethed crocodile seemed to be stunned for a moment. It blinked its small eyes, but its ability to think was not enough to understand what was happening in front of it. After pausing for a moment, it still rushed over, wanting to swallow the 2 little mosquitoes in front of it. But it failed. Vines instantly appeared beneath its feet and wrapped around its entire body, rendering it unable to move an inch. It angrily swung its tail, and the vines immediately broke. Cold sweat broke out on Mo Tiange's forehead. "This demonic beast's brute force is too strong, my formation won't be able to hold it for long." This. Murongzi's complexion also turned pale. This bit of time isn't enough for us to run. Mo Tiange once again waved the formation flag. Water and quicksand instantly appeared inside the formation, rapidly turning it into a swamp, once again trapping the iron-teethed crocodile. At the same time, he gritted his teeth and said, "Senior brother Murong, I'll hold it back. You attack it. If we can't outrun it, we can only fight." Murongzi hesitated for a moment before answering, If we don't fight now, it'll be too late." Mo Tiange shouted, "Hurry up. I'll think of a way to hold it back so it won't attack you. You attack it as hard as you can." Infected by her attitude, Murongzi clenched his teeth and said, "All right. If worst comes to worst, we'll just fight it." Two aura refining cultivators definitely couldn't defeat a foundation building cultivator, but a second-rank demonic beast without the ability to think or use magic weapons might be able to put up a fight. Murongzi immediately summoned his flying sword, used the light body technique, and attacked. But in the next second, his complexion turned unsightly. His flying sword was a gift from an elder in his school. It was even infused with rare iron essence, so it was incomparably sharp. Usually, it had a lot of advantages in fights of magical power, but against this iron-teethed crocodile's thick skin, it unexpectedly didn't have the slightest effect. After the swamp couldn't hold the iron-teethed crocodile any longer, Mo Tiange once again waved her sword, causing a raging fire to appear inside the formation. At the same time, she took out a handful of bewitching flower seeds and threw them at the crocodile. Although the fire stopped the crocodile, the bewitching flower only made it wave its tail. With her current spiritual aura, the seeds she could use could only grow in a short period of time. However, second-rank demonic beasts already didn't care about these kinds of seeds. With no other choice, she took out a handful of restorative panaceas. Using a formation to trap a second-rank demonic beast consumed too much spiritual aura, so she had no choice but to consume panaceas to drag it down. On the other side, Murongzi wasn't someone with an undeserved reputation. Once he saw that his flying sword was useless, he immediately swapped it for something else, a whip that glittered with a golden light. As soon as he swung the whip, it turned into a streak of golden light, emitting a loud "paw." But after he swung it, Murongzi's complexion changed again. This whip still couldn't break the iron-teethed crocodile's thick skin. After this happened a few times, Murongzi's complexion turned ashen. Not only was he unable to break the iron-teethed crocodile's defense, but his spirit tool was also damaged by its bite. As expected of an iron-teethed crocodile, its teeth were extremely sharp. Mo Tiange wasn't much better off. Although she was relying on the formation, her spiritual aura was being drained too quickly by manipulating this formation to resist the second-rank demonic beast's attack. She already felt that her spiritual aura was almost exhausted, so she had no choice but to grab a handful of restorative panaceas and stuff them into her mouth. With this kind of depletion speed, she was no longer afraid of wasting medicinal pills. If she couldn't survive, no matter how many medicinal pills she had, they would be useless. Use talismans. Use talismans to attack it. Mo Tiange shouted at the dumbfounded Murongzi. This iron-teethed crocodile had thick skin and thick flesh. The layer of hard skin on its body was comparable to armor, so she simply couldn't pierce it. She could only use spells to penetrate that layer of skin and injure it. Upon hearing her shout, Murongzi regained his senses. He took out a handful of talismans and, without any regard for the consequences, slammed them all onto the iron-teethed crocodile's head. These talismans contained spells of various elements. Sea of fire, ice, stones, quicksand, and vines, all of them smashed onto the iron-teethed crocodile's head. This time, the iron-teethed crocodile finally reacted. It raised its head and stared at Murongzi, who was flying in midair, with its small eyes. It then opened its mouth and sprayed a jet of water. Murongzi was greatly alarmed. He moved sideways with great difficulty to dodge, but he was careless and came in contact with some of the water. His body unexpectedly became sluggish and he fell to the ground. Taking advantage of this moment, Mo Tiange quickly took out the formation discs and formation flags for the disorienting formation and the spirit-trapping formation. She simply laid them down and soon after, she waved the formation flags. Vines once again appeared in the middle of the formation, firmly binding the iron-teethed crocodile. When the iron-teethed crocodile's attention returned to her side, it discovered that the spiritual aura inside its body had become slower. In a fit of rage, it couldn't care less about the other little bug and wanted to tear the bug in front of it to shreds. However, when it crawled forward, the scene in front of it changed. It actually couldn't find the existence of that little bug, so it immediately became confused. Seeing that Murongzi still hadn't crawled back up, Mo Tiange anxiously said, "Senior Marshal Brother Murong." As if he heard her voice, Murongzi struggled to stuff several medicinal pills into his mouth and crawled back up with great difficulty. He was already seriously injured, so it was already very difficult for him to use spirit tools and light body technique. However, he was also hit by the iron-teethed crocodile's jet of water. This was a poisonous spring, so everything in the surroundings was poisonous, let alone a demonic beast that advanced to the second rank in this place. The iron-teethed crocodile's poison was much stronger than the poisonous fog, so his injuries became even more serious. Ignoring everything else, Murongzi swallowed several healing pills to neutralize the poison and struggled to fly up. With a wave of his hand, a handful of fine flying needles flew towards the iron-teethed crocodile's eye. The iron-teethed crocodile blinked and swung its head. Some of the flying needles were flung away, while the other needles pierced the thick skin on its head. Without the slightest reaction, the needles fell down one after another. Murongzi didn't give up and continued to throw the needles. Inside the spirit-trapping formation, the iron-teethed crocodile's spiritual aura circulation became slower. In the end, the iron-teethed crocodile didn't manage to dodge the needles. With a poo sound, its eye was pierced. It instantly became furious and let out a snoring sound while facing the sky. Mo Tiange was delighted. She immediately stuffed another handful of restorative panaceas into her mouth, then waved the formation flag. The sea of fire inside the formation smashed down, causing the ground to shake. After being attacked by several spells, the thick skin of the iron-teethed crocodile finally showed signs of being burnt. Murongzi didn't let this opportunity slip by. He once again took out his flying sword and stabbed it towards the burnt part of the iron-teethed crocodile's skin. This time, the sword stabbed solidly. It broke the iron-teethed crocodile's skin and pierced deeply into its flesh. Feeling the pain, the iron-teethed crocodile swung its tail and broke a big tree next to the spring. However, it still couldn't find where those annoying little bugs were. All it could see was the poisonous spring where it had lived for several hundred years. No matter how hard it crawled, it would always crawl back to its original spot. Blood flowed out of its eyes. Its body was in great pain from being hit by spells, and there was also something stuck in its flesh. It let out a painful grunt, but it still couldn't find those two little bugs. The only thing it could see was spells continuously smashing down on it. In the end, it couldn't hold on any longer. Another spell smashed down on it, and it could no longer open its eyes. Mo Tiange gasped for breath. Her legs went soft, and she could no longer stand and knelt down. There wasn't even a trace of spiritual aura left in her body. A second-rank demonic beast was indeed much stronger than a first-rank demonic beast. She could kill those dozens of demonic monkeys without the slightest danger using the 5 elements life and death formation, but this second-rank demonic beast. She spent so much effort and ate so many medicinal pills, yet she could only trap it. If it weren't for Murongzi's help, it would have died for sure today. Murongzi lay motionless not too far from her. Just now, he practically threw out all of his talismans. Once the iron-teethed crocodile died, he fell to the ground and couldn't get up. Mo Tiange was a bit worried. She once again swallowed a restorative panacea, barely recovering some of her spiritual aura. She then stood up with difficulty and dragged her heavy legs towards Murongzi. Senior Marshal Brother Murong. Senior Marshal Brother Murong. Murongzi lay motionlessly on the ground. There was a bloodstain on the corner of his mouth. Obviously, he vomited because his injuries were too heavy. Mo Tiange clenched her teeth, took out a small reversion pill and stuffed it into his mouth. Right now, although she wasn't injured, her spiritual aura was completely exhausted. If any danger appeared in the short term, it would be troublesome. It was better to save his life first. After all, it would always be safer if the two of them were together. After feeding him the small reversion pill, Murongzi finally slowly regained consciousness. When he saw her, there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, the pills you gave me, Mo Tiange smiled bitterly. They were specially prepared for the sake of this trial. Now, I can only let Senior Marshal Brother take advantage of them. She didn't dare to say she had another bottle on her. Although Senior Marshal Brother Murong didn't seem like that kind of person and was Murong Yan's elder brother, they didn't have much of a friendship. Murongzi didn't doubt her. His expression changed as he earnestly said, "Thank you, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. If it weren't for the medicinal pills you gave me, my injuries definitely wouldn't have lasted until tomorrow." Mo Tiange simply waved her hand. "If Senior Marshal Brother Murong doesn't want to take advantage of me, you can just return the medicinal pills to me after we leave this place. Right now, I have to treat my injuries first. Otherwise, if we run into someone again." At this point, she suddenly wrinkled her brows. Someone was coming. Chapter 66. Mo Tiange shook her sleeves. Several things flew out and were buried in the soil. Soon after, she grabbed a few restorative spirit pills and stuffed them into her mouth. After doing these two things, the figures of a few people appeared in the poisonous fog. Ze. Mo Tiange immediately tightened her grip on her greenwood sword. Murongzi, on the other hand, endured the pain and stood up. There were a total of 3 people, all of whom were 10th layer qi refining cultivators. The one in the lead was a middle-aged cultivator, a young man about 20 years old, and an old man about 50 to 60 years old. The 3 of them didn't seem easy to deal with. Since the middle-aged cultivator was the leader, he must have the highest status or the most powerful. The young man was able to reach the 10th layer of the aura refining realm at such a young age, so he must also have some skills. As for the old man, there was no need to talk about him. He had a lot of experience, so he must be the most cunning. When he and Murongzi glanced at each other, both of them smiled bitterly. He had just experienced a bitter battle, and he had actually encountered such a combination. The 3 men stood not far away, cautiously sizing them up. Both Mo Tiange and Murongzi secretly pretended to be indifferent and tightened their grip on their flying swords. After a while, the young man couldn't help but ask, "Senior brothers, what are we waiting for?" The old man frowned and slowly said, "Be careful." They all saw the corpse of the iron-teethed crocodile on the ground. Although it was already dead, there was still a huge pressure remaining. It was obvious that it wasn't a Tier 1 demonic beast, which caused them to hesitate. For 2 people to be able to kill a second-rank demonic beast, it was obvious that these 2 people definitely had extraordinary skills. However, they themselves were not to be trifled with, so they were unwilling to let it go just like that. It must be known that the corpse of a second-rank demonic beast could definitely be exchanged for a foundation-building pill. Caution, consideration, fanaticism, these expressions appeared on the faces of the 3 of them in turn. He was worried that his opponent would be too strong and lose him, but at the same time, he was unwilling to let go of such a great benefit. The corpse of a second-rank demonic beast could not only be made into a spirit tool, but it could also be made into a magic tool for foundation establishment cultivators. This was another huge fortune. The young man couldn't restrain himself and shouted, "Senior brothers, what are you hesitating for? Are we going to let them off for nothing?" The old man said, "These 2 aren't easy to deal with. Don't be rash." Finally, the 2 of them looked at the middle-aged cultivator between them. For a time, the middle-aged cultivator was also hesitant. He had no confidence in killing them, and he was unwilling to let them go. However, the two of them were looking at them with indifferent expressions, as if they didn't care about their decision at all. In fact, Mo Tiange and Murongzi weren't relaxed at all. Although Murongzi had taken a small reversion pill, healing his injuries wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Fighting while he was seriously injured repeatedly had already caused serious damage to his meridians. Right now, his expression remained unchanged purely because of his unswerving determination. Mo Tiange was the same. She was fully aware that they had just gone through a bitter battle and both of them were exhausted, so how could she not be nervous? However, she was no longer a child who hadn't seen the world. She had traveled extensively with second uncle and experienced many fights of magical powers in the past few years, so she knew she couldn't show weakness at this time. The middle-aged cultivator struggled for a long time before reluctantly saying, "Let's go somewhere else to take a look." The three of them turned around to leave. Mo Tiange and Murongzi secretly heaved sighs of relief. They really didn't have the confidence to fight them. Unexpectedly, the three of them suddenly stopped. The middle-aged cultivator sneered. "We were almost fooled by them. After killing a second-rank demonic beast, even if they weren't injured, how much spiritual aura would they have left?" Right after he said that, the three of them turned around and immediately split into three directions to flank them. Mo Tiange immediately slapped a defensive talisman on her body and released her greenwood sword. Murongzi's reaction wasn't slow either. Although he didn't have any talismans, he still had his spirit tool. The flying sword mixed with iron essence was extremely fast and flew out in a flash. The two of them struck first and gained the upper hand, catching their opponents off guard. The young man looked at the two flying swords flying towards him and momentarily panicked. These two swords were very fast, so they obviously weren't ordinary weapons. He had no choice but to dodge in a hurry. Mo Tiange stealthily shifted her position and threw out a large number of fire thorn seeds, temporarily trapping the young man. Just as she was about to tell Murongzi to deal with the old man together, she heard a muffled groan. She turned around and saw Murongzi clutching his chest while spitting out a mouthful of blood. The flying sword he was controlling was also swaying in the air. Mo Tiange was shocked. Senior Marshal Brother Murong. The three of them were overjoyed. The young man was trapped and couldn't escape for the time being. The middle-aged cultivator and the old man glanced at each other, then simultaneously attacked. The middle-aged cultivator took out the most common spirit tool in the cultivation world, the flying sword, while the old man threw out a mirror. Mo Tiange hastily recalled her greenwood sword, but it only managed to block the mirror. The flying sword rapidly stabbed towards Murongzi, but Murongzi barely managed to dodge it. The flying sword brushed past his shoulder, causing blood to blossom. How could the middle-aged cultivator let go of this opportunity? He quickly flew towards Murongzi, caught the flying sword, and stabbed it towards him. Mo Tiange wanted to help, but the old man's mirror was really powerful. After being blocked by her, it flew back to the old man's hand. He immediately flipped the mirror over and a golden light shone towards her. Although she had a defensive barrier on her body, she didn't dare to block it, so she could only take back her greenwood sword to block the golden light. Right at that moment, the middle-aged cultivator had already closed in on Murongzi. Seeing that Murongzi didn't have any strength to fight back, the middle-aged cultivator revealed an evil grin and stabbed the flying sword in his hand. Pooh! The flying sword pierced deep into Murongzi's body. Blood flowed down the blade of the sword, but at the same time, the middle-aged cultivator let out a loud "ah" and let go of the sword to cover his abdomen. A flying sword pierced through his abdomen on his back. It was Murongzi's incomparably sharp flying sword mixed with iron essence. Mo Tiange's expression changed greatly, but she heard the other party shout, "Senior Marshal Brother Zhang." Murongzi and the middle-aged cultivator perished together, but the other party didn't look angry. Instead, they panicked. In just a short moment, one of them was trapped and the other was killed. The old man made a prompt decision. He put away the mirror in his hand, then immediately fled into the distance. Perhaps the reason he could survive until now was because he was timid. Mo Tiange didn't chase after him. Instead, she swung her flying sword, ending the middle-aged cultivator's life, then turned towards the remaining young man. Once the young man saw the old man fleeing, his expression immediately became very unsightly. He swung the large knife in his hand, chopping the fire brambles in half and attacking Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange had never met an opponent who used spirit tools to attack like a secular martial artist, so she couldn't react in time. Fortunately, she had defensive talismans on her, so she retreated while parrying with her greenwood sword. She wanted to counterattack, but she didn't have much spiritual aura left, so she could only retreat slowly. Seeing that she didn't dare to take his attack, the other party had a complacent expression on his face as he approached step by step. Mo Tiange suddenly smiled. A formation flag appeared in her hand and she waved it lightly. All of a sudden, with a pa sound, the formation flags and formation discs that were hidden suddenly stood up. The young man turned pale with fright, but he was already bewildered by the scene in front of him. Yellow sand filled the sky. It was like a desert in the far west. Apart from that, there was nothing else. This was a formation she hastily laid just now. Originally, she wasn't sure if she could use it. Fortunately, this young man was an impulsive person, so she lured him into the formation step by step. Now that he was in her formation, he was naturally at her mercy. She waved the formation flag again, and the scene changed again. Spells of the 5 elements flew towards the young man in an endless stream. The young man brandished his knife to block them, but he discovered that these spells disappeared upon contact. They were simply illusions. He was so angry that he cursed loudly. Mo Tiange once again swallowed a restorative panacea, then grabbed a talisman. She controlled her greenwood sword and attacked the young man in the formation together. The young man thought it was an illusion again, so he didn't block them. He was immediately hit solidly and couldn't be more dead. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief and withdrew her greenwood sword. When she thought of Murongzi, she hastily ran back. Senior Martial Brother Murong. She once again helped Murongzi up from the ground. Mo Tiange discovered that his breath was already very weak. He was already seriously injured. The two of them encountered the iron-teethed crocodile, and after a thrilling battle, they finally killed it. Then, they encountered these 3 enemies. His abdomen was pierced through. He basically relied on his last breath to kill that middle-aged cultivator, but in the end, he couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed. Right now, his spiritual aura was exhausted, his meridians were damaged, and his dantian was also pierced through. He simply couldn't be saved. Murongzi slowly opened his eyes and said with difficulty, "Junior. Martial Brother Yi." Mo Tiange nodded. "I'm here." Murongzi spat out a mouthful of blood. Mo Tiange hastily supported him. She pressed her palm against his and channeled spiritual aura into his body. This made Murongzi feel a bit better. He showed a faint smile and said in a weak voice, "I know. I can't hold on anymore. Please, do me a favor." Mo Tiange promptly nodded. "Senior Martial Brother Murong, please speak." Murongzi pulled out his Qingquan bag with difficulty and gasped for breath. "In our clan, the one with the most hope is Xiaoyan. Please, give the demonic beast and the flying sword I killed to her." He closed his eyes and said, "As for the rest, I'll give it to Junior Martial Brother as a souvenir." As he spoke, blood kept flowing out of his mouth and he firmly held onto Mo Tiange's sleeves. Upon hearing his last words, Mo Tiange sighed inwardly. "Rest assured, Senior Martial Brother. I'll bring the things there." Murongzi smiled, but his eyes were filled with unwillingness and sorrow. He finally loosened his grip, his head tilted, and he breathed no more. Mo Tiange was stunned for a long time before she regained her composure. Although she didn't have any friendship with Murongzi, she still felt sad. This was the omnipresent death of cultivators. Not long ago, although Senior Marshal Brother Murong was seriously injured, he was still talking cheerfully and full of confidence. But in the blink of an eye, he became a corpse. She wiped her face, erased this sadness, then stood up to clean up the scene. In any case, she had to continue living. Building her foundation, forming her gold core, forming her nascent soul, she had to live happily. First, she removed the Qianquan bags and weapons from the 3 corpses, then burned the corpses clean. She only put Murong Zi's ashes in a jade box. Soon after, she cleaned the bloodstains on her body and sorted the things in the 3 Qianquan bags. She used up a lot of her own medicinal pills and talismans, but fortunately, the 2 Zixia sect disciples still had some. All 3 of them had the corpses of demonic beasts on their bodies, but the other 2 only had 3 to 5, while Murong Zi had more than 10. After pondering for a moment, she took out a Qianquan bag and put all the demonic beasts the 3 of them hunted into it. She then put all the spirit tools on Murong Zi's body into the Qianquan bag. After all, she had gone through thick and thin with Murong Zi and was acquainted with Murong Yen. These spirit tools were useless to her, so she might as well return them to Murong Yen, that is, if Murong Yen was still alive. Soon after, she went to deal with the iron-teethed crocodile's corpse. This iron-teethed crocodile's carcass was a valuable material for refining tools. While she was cleaning up, she found the flying needles Murong Zi left behind. These flying needles were sparkling and transparent, almost traceless. They were indeed good for sneak attacks. She then put all of them into her Qianquan bag. After she finished sorting everything and replenished her spiritual aura inside the formation, Mo Tiange decided to leave the poisonous spring. That old man from Zixia sect had escaped, so who knew if there would be anyone else coming? It would be better for her to find another place to hide. Mo Tiange couldn't help but sigh when she turned around to look at the poisonous spring. Not long ago, they were talking cheerfully and wittily, but now, they were already a pile of ashes. Chapter 67. She entered the valley at 7 a.m. yesterday, so it was now 1:15 a.m. Mo Tiange calculated that she still needed 6 hours to leave the valley. A lot of things could happen in 6 hours, and a lot of people could die. She needed to be more cautious. The exit formation would be opened in the center, and the more central the area was, the more dangerous it would be. Mo Tiange thought for a long time before she decided to wander around the periphery. Once the formation opened, she would go to the center. Moreover, she had to use her divine sense at all times. Not only did she have to avoid people, but she also had to avoid demonic beasts. This was somewhat difficult, but it was still safer than staying in the poisonous spring. Who knew whether that old man from Zixia sect would call his fellow disciples or not? After all, the corpse of a second-rank demonic beast was very attractive to aura-refining cultivators like them. In the east of this forest, there was a 300 feet tall waterfall. In the southwest, there was a high mountain. In the north, there was the cliff they came down from, and in the northwest, near the cliff, was the poisonous spring. The only way to leave this forest was to the northwest of the poisonous spring. However, the poisonous spring was an extremely dangerous existence. Not only were there demonic beasts that lived in groups, but there was also a poisonous fog that filled the air. There were also unknown dangers in the deep water, so no one would think of leaving from there. Therefore, nearly 1,000 aura-refining cultivators were in this forest. Even though this forest was very large and it wasn't easy to meet friends, it wasn't difficult to meet people. An hour after leaving the poisonous spring, Mo Tiange had already met several groups of people. What Murong Zi said was true. The 3 groups had already formed teams to guard against danger and to kill enemies. In order to avoid these people, she spent a lot of effort. Her breath-concealing technique was only passed down from Yi Clan's records, so it couldn't be considered brilliant. However, because the spirit-concealing jade pendant not only concealed her physique but also had spiritual aura-gathering and purifying effects, the effects of her spells were somewhat enhanced. Because she knew her limits, she was even more cautious. Whenever she sensed someone from afar, she would immediately avoid them. Along the way, she could clearly see the fierceness of the battle. More than once, Mo Tiange saw traces of fights of magical powers, charred trees, cracked ground, and congealed bloodstains. Every dark red puddle on the ground perhaps represented the end of a life. Sometimes, they would come across corpses that had not been disposed of. Some of them were dressed in purple, some in yellow, and some in green. The frozen expressions on their faces were all hatred and fear. Occasionally, she would see familiar faces. They were fellow disciples or sisters she had met in the sect. Fortunately, there weren't any fellow disciples that she could call friends with. Later, she gradually became numb to it. No matter what kind of marks she encountered, she could turn a blind eye to them. Nevertheless, despite being so careful, she was still discovered by the two Zixia sect disciples. With the greenwood sword guarding her side and several talismans in her other hand, Mo Tiange discreetly observed her surroundings. Among the two people besieging her, one was a robust man whose physique wasn't inferior to Lui Dao's, and the other was a beautiful young married woman. The young woman was in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, and the burly man was in the 9th layer of the aura refining realm. Moreover, both of them seemed to be very experienced in fights of magical powers. One in front of the other in the back, they blocked her way. The surrounding trees were very dense, and the two directions that the two of them were blocking were the easiest points to break through. Mo Tiange couldn't help but frown. It seemed escaping was impossible, so she could only kill them. However, these two people had silently surrounded her, so they might not be easy to deal with. She had to think of a way to deal with them. After sizing her up, the robust man uttered an and said, "Wife, this brat seems to be the one old man Chen mentioned." Old man Chen? Mo Tiange pondered for a moment. Could he be the old man from Zixia sect who ran away from the poisonous spring? However, she didn't expect the two people in front of her to be husband and wife. This young married woman's cultivation level was high and she was beautiful, but she actually chose such a crude man whose cultivation level wasn't obvious as her Dao companion? Mo Tiange couldn't help but glance at the young married woman. The young married woman saw her face and said with a smile, "Husband, it's not like you don't know that old man Chen has always been timid. However, this little brother is quite handsome. What a pity." Upon hearing the young married woman praising another man's handsomeness, the robust man grunted with dissatisfaction. Wife. The young married woman seemed to be very proud of her husband's jealousy. She covered her mouth and laughed for a while before saying, "Husband, what are you afraid of? No matter how handsome he is, won't he still die in our hands?" The robust man felt her words were reasonable. He chuckled and said, "Wife, you're right." He then turned towards Mo Tiange and glared at her. "Brat, hand over your life." Right after he finished speaking, Mo Tiange had already made her move. Her greenwood sword swiftly shot forward, but it was a feint. The raging flame talisman in her hand, which was hidden under the light of greenwood sword, flew out of her hand. The robust man was about to attack, but his initiative was seized. He immediately became furious and brandished the spirit tool in his hand, aiming to hit greenwood's sword. His spirit tool was a huge iron wheel, which seemed to fit his body shape perfectly. He was quite confident in using his spirit tool to fight against Mo Tiange. Unfortunately, Mo Tiange's real killing move wasn't on her spirit tool. Greenwood's sword retreated after being hit. After the iron will repelled Greenwood's sword, it still fiercely rushed towards Mo Tiange. At the same time, the young married woman behind her also opened an umbrella and threw it at her. Mo Tiange didn't panic. The raging flame talisman had already arrived. With a loud bang, the robust man let out a blood-curdling scream. Just as the iron wheel and the umbrella were about to reach her, Mo Tiange's figure suddenly disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, Mo Tiange appeared in front of the robust man. She thrust the greenwood sword in her hand, ruthlessly stabbing the robust man's chest. The robust man let out a shrill scream before he suddenly fell to the ground, no longer breathing. "Husband," the young married woman screamed and rushed over. Mo Tiange used light body technique to jump and avoid the umbrella. She was able to successfully launch a sneak attack this time because her cultivation level was one layer higher than the robust man's, but the robust man still underestimated her. Pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger was indeed the most useful trick in the cultivation world. This young married woman seemed to have deep feelings for her husband. When she realized her husband was no longer breathing, she angrily rushed towards Mo Tiange, wishing she could tear Mo Tiange's body into 10,000 pieces. Nevertheless, Mo Tiange didn't plan to fight her head-on. Her enemy had obviously lost her mind, so she didn't want to die together with her. Talismans and spirit tools were continuously thrown at her. Mo Tiange only dodged them by relying on light body technique. It wasn't until the other party was obviously so angry that she couldn't control herself that Mo Tiange threw the greenwood sword, talismans, and a handful of seeds at her. Seeing that Mo Tiange was using the same method to deal with her, the young married woman was furious. She patted a defensive talisman on her body and used the umbrella to block Mo Tiange's attack. Her other hand grasped a handful of talismans and was about to throw them at Mo Tiange. But she didn't have the chance. Before she could throw the talismans, she felt pain in her body. The hand holding the umbrella powerlessly slipped and she fell to the ground. After confirming that the two people were dead, Mo Tiange collected their things and dealt with their corpses. She didn't stay for even a moment and ran away. This fight of magical power seemed to go very smoothly. In just a moment, she finished dealing with the two people, but in fact, her losses weren't small. In order to deal damage to that burly man, she had used up 5 or 6 flame talismans, which was equivalent to dozens of spirit stones. Moreover, she had also used a priceless invisibility talisman, which second uncle had spent a lot of money to buy. She killed the young married woman while she was panicking. It seemed like she used the same method she used to attack the burly man, but in fact, she mixed the talismans with the sparkling and translucent flying needles left by Murongzi. That was why she was able to silently break through the young married woman's umbrella and defensive barrier. Although she had a lot of experience in fights of magical power, this was the best time she had ever achieved her predetermined goal. She made a decision in a split second and immediately attacked without making any mistakes. In the blink of an eye, she gained the upper hand. Mo Tiange carefully reviewed this fight in her mind. She was in a calm and focused state, grasping all the details in her hands, making the most correct decision in a split second and hitting the target with one strike. She wanted to remember this feeling. This was the best state for fights of magical power. Someone else was in front of her. Mo Tiange turned around, but she didn't run far before she sensed several people's breaths not too far from her. She had no choice but to restrain her breath, find a tree, jump on it, and hide herself. The first group to pass by was a mixed group of people from Jindao School and Yunwu sect. Mo Tiange didn't plan to go out and greet them. With so many people together, it would be very easy for them to be discovered, and it would also be easy for them to fight. Although it would be safer with more people, more disputes meant more chances of death. These people passed by very quickly. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment and decided not to come down. Instead, she continued to sit on the top of the tree with her breath restrained and took out the Qiankuan bags she obtained just now. The seeds in her hands were already used up, but there were still a lot of talismans and medicinal pills in the Qiankuan bags of these Zixia sect disciples. There were also several good spirit tools. However, for aura refining disciples, spirit tools that hadn't been refined by themselves weren't easy to use and could only be used as backups. In addition, the flying needles left by Murongzi were quite useful. Controlling these flying needles required divine sense rather than spiritual aura, so aura refining cultivators couldn't use 2 spirit tools at the same time. If these flying needles were used well, very few aura refining disciples would be able to defend against them. After putting away the things that were useful for fighting, Mo Tiange jumped down from the tree and continued to move forward. She hadn't gone far when she was startled. There were a lot of corpses on the ground. There were disciples from all 3 cultivation groups. When she saw the faces of those dead Yunwu sect disciples, she realized that they were the ones who just passed by. As it turned out, they actually ran into another group of Zixia sect disciples and perished together. Mo Tiange shook her head and collected these people's chinkuan bags. She then set a fire and burned all the corpses. On her way here, at least 50 to 60 people had died, and there were still many places she hadn't been to. She was afraid that after 4 hours, less than half of the people would be able to leave this place alive. Thinking up to this point, she couldn't help but sneer. Zixia sect probably didn't expect this, right? Merging Yunwu sect and Jindao school resulted in the loss of countless high-level aura refining disciples. Among these people, they were the group of aura refining disciples with the highest hopes of building their foundation. As a result, the number of foundation building cultivators in the next 100 years would be greatly reduced. They wouldn't be able to become the 8th cultivation group. On the contrary, their strength would be much weaker. Therefore, she wasn't the least bit afraid of being punished for killing people. Because at that time, they would discover that they couldn't afford to lose aura refining disciples. Chapter 68. In the dense forest, a figure was flying. She didn't stop until she couldn't sense the breaths of other cultivators behind her. What bad luck! Mo Tiange covered her chest with her hand. She felt the aura inside her body surging and felt very regretful. It was all because she was too careless. She thought she was very safe after laying a formation in her hiding place. As a result, the spiritual aura fluctuation of the formation was discovered by a group of people from Zixia sect, who planned to surround her. She was able to escape this time thanks to the several escape talismans she had and the formation that helped her resist for a while. Otherwise, if she had to face 5 or 6 people who were coming at her aggressively, she probably wouldn't even have ashes left. Her aura was a bit unstable for a while after she used the escape talisman forcefully in the encirclement. She swallowed an aura-nourishing pill and looked up at the starry sky. It seemed to be the hour of the Ean now. There were still more than 2 hours left before the exit formation would open. With the fierce melee, there were fewer and fewer people alive and more fighting scenes. Along the way, all she encountered were corpses, not people. Thinking of this, Mo Tiange shook her head and smiled bitterly. She didn't care about what happened to other people. It was good enough that she could save her own life. At this moment, she felt the aura inside her dantian was still unstable. She hesitated for a moment and finally found a tree with luxuriant branches and leaves. She jumped on it and restrained her aura completely. She didn't lay a formation, nor did she use her divine sense. She just quietly adjusted her aura. Although she wasn't seriously injured, if she didn't adjust her aura, it would be very disadvantageous for her if she encountered an enemy again. She didn't want to use the escape talisman again to escape, lest a minor injury turned into a serious one. As time passed, no one came to this place. It seemed that there were indeed not many cultivators alive in the forest. Mo Tiange sighed inwardly. After experiencing several life and death battles, she felt more and more indifferent. Even death couldn't easily move her. Perhaps, after seeing it many times, she felt it wasn't a big deal. There were so many deaths on the path of cultivation. If she didn't get used to it, how could she go further on the road to immortality? She was glad that she could adapt so quickly. Her aura gradually stabilized, and she breathed a sigh of relief. There seemed to be a demonic beast nearby. She could vaguely hear its roar, but obviously, no one wanted to catch it now. The more people died, the more likely it was for the survivors to obtain the foundation building pills. Moreover, killing others and directly obtaining the spoils of war was much faster than slowly killing them one by one. Even she herself had obtained many demonic beasts that were killed by others. The 2 cultivators she killed in the poisonous spring, the husband and wife who besieged her, and the group of people who perished together with her, in addition to the 20 to 30 demonic monkey corpses on her body, she basically didn't need to take out all of the demonic beast corpses to obtain a foundation building pill. Therefore, she didn't want to cause any trouble. Just because she was used to death did not mean that she would kill. As long as others did not offend her, she would not make a move. Thinking of this, she smiled bitterly. Sure enough, he had become a cold and heartless person. All of a sudden, the sound of light footsteps entered her ears. Mo Tiange opened her eyes. She didn't use her divine sense, so she didn't notice him until he came close. Then, through the branches and leaves, he vaguely saw several pairs of feet. It seemed like there were 3 people, 2 men and a woman. The woman's footsteps were staggering, which was very strange. She tilted her head but didn't move. She continued to hide. In a situation where she couldn't even protect herself, it was better not to meddle in other people's business. The voices of these people came from below. "Big brother, why did you walk for so long?" This voice was very young and sounded very impatient. Another voice, which was slightly lower, answered, "How would I know?" "Hey, stinky girl, you're not lying to us, are you?" Cough, cough. The woman's coughs rang out. Mo Tiange couldn't help but frown. This voice. "Senior Marshal Brothers, why are you so anxious? Can't you sense the demonic beast's spiritual aura? That demonic beast is guarding that vermilion heart fruit tree." It was Murong Yan's voice. This answer seemed to have been muddled. The younger one said, "What you said seems to be reasonable." As the footsteps gradually faded away, Mo Tiange muttered to herself for a moment, then quietly slipped down from the tree and quietly followed them. The cultivation levels of these 2 male cultivators couldn't be considered high. One was in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm, while the other was in the 9th layer. They actually survived until now and were even together with Murong Yan. Moreover, based on their conversation, it seemed they wanted Murong Yan to take them to find some vermilion heart fruit. She had never heard of this kind of spiritual fruit. Could it be some kind of mystical fruit? Mo Tiange shook her head and denied this idea. If it really was some kind of mystical fruit, Murong Yan should have gone to pick it a long time ago. Why would she wait until now? She must have been caught by these 2 men and used those words to deceive them. Mo Tiange quietly approached them and carefully observed the situation. Sure enough, Murong Yan's hands were tied and her body was injured. The 2 male cultivators were Zixia sect cultivators. One was in his 20s while the other was in his 20s. They soon found the demonic beast's location. Soon after, she saw the 2 men fly into a rage and pull out their spirit tools. "Stinky girl, you actually dared to deceive us brothers." However, Murong Yan was also very quick-witted. She desperately dodged to the side and cleverly startled the demonic beast. She then hid behind the 2 men and the demonic beast pounced on them. This demonic beast was a first-ranked giant ape. Although its cultivation level wasn't obvious, its skin was thick and its flesh was extremely strong. For a moment, the 2 men's hands and feet were tied down by it. Seeing this, Murong Yan quietly retreated. Taking advantage of the fact that the 2 men weren't paying attention, she hastily ran backwards. "Big brother, this whore wants to run." The younger one fiercely stared at Murong Yan's back. The older one used his spirit tool to block the giant ape's attack and shouted, "Chase after her. She actually deceived us. We can't let her run away." "All right." The younger one withdrew his spirit tool and chased after the giant ape. After barely blocking the giant ape's attack once again, the man muttered, "This won't do. She's too strong. It seems I have to use a treasure." With that thought in mind, he took out a pigeon egg-sized purple ball from his robe and threw it at the giant ape. With a loud boom, the giant ape was instantly blasted into a bloody mess. The rocks and trees in the vicinity were all blown away, raising the area within a radius of 30 meters to the ground. The man felt a bit of heartache as he watched the bloody mess. There wasn't a single piece of flesh left on the ground. It was unclear whether he was feeling heartache for the corpse that couldn't be pieced back together or the treasure he used. After feeling heartache for a while, he clenched his teeth and turned around to chase after his younger brother. However, He only ran a few steps when he heard his younger brother's miserable scream. Startled, he hurriedly ran forward. Third brother. Third brother. Before long, he found his younger brother lying on the ground and there was no one around him. Mo Tiange pulled Murong Yen and ran madly. She only stopped when she could no longer sense that person's breath. Murong Yen looked at her gratefully. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, thank you. Fortunately, I met you. Otherwise, Mo Tiange shook her head and said with a smile, Senior Marshal Sister Murong, you don't have to be so polite. It was nothing. She paused for a moment then asked curiously, Senior Marshal Sister, what happened? Mo Tiange's question made Murong Yen smile bitterly. She shook her head and said, it's all because I didn't like cultivating before. This time, I really suffered a lot. I ran into Zixia sect's disciples several times, but every time, I narrowly escaped. Later, I ran into them. They wanted to kill me, but I lied to them that there was a strange plant here. Sure enough, it was like that. Mo Tiange nodded. What was that thing in that person's hand? How could it be so powerful? About that, I'm also not very clear. Spirit tools don't seem like spirit tools, and magic weapons don't seem like magic weapons. It seems to be a kind of special object refined from the soul of demonic beasts and a lightning spell. Once it's thrown with spiritual aura, it will explode. Its power is extremely powerful. From what I've seen, no one can withstand it. This was Mo Tiange's first time seeing this thing. Its power was indeed enormous. Perhaps no aura-refining cultivator could withstand it, so she chose to run. After all, she didn't want to lose her life. When she saw Murong Yen, Mo Tiange couldn't help but think of Murong Zi. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she still decided to think about it after they got out. Danger was everywhere now. If she suddenly found out that her elder brother had died, she was afraid her emotions would fluctuate and affect the fight of magical powers. Mo Tiange asked, Senior Marshal Sister Murong, what do you plan to do next? Upon hearing Mo Tiange's question, Murong Yen showed a bitter smile. I won't hide it from Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Before I came here, I was full of ambition and was determined to fight for a foundation-building pill. Only now do I realize that I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I don't have any regrets now. I just hope to get out of here safely. In the future, I'll cultivate diligently before thinking about other things. Mo Tiange nodded inwardly upon hearing what Murong Yen said. It seemed Murong Yen really understood. This was good. Murong Zi's painstaking efforts weren't wasted. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Murong Yen hesitated for a while but in the end, she still shook her head. Forget it. We'll talk about it if I can get out of here alive. I'll take my leave first. Mo Tiange was stunned. Senior Marshal Sister Murong, you're not coming with me? Murong Yen suddenly turned her head. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you don't mind coming with me? Mo Tiange was dumbfounded for a moment before she finally reacted. Could it be that Murong Yen thinks I won't be willing to go with her? Mo Tiange immediately smiled and said, what do you think, Senior Marshal Sister? Upon seeing Mo Tiange's expression, Murong Yen smiled embarrassedly. I was thinking too much. The two of them smiled at each other. The estrangement caused by the changes in the school during this period of time instantly disappeared. Murong Yan's expression was no longer stiff. Instead, she looked a little more relaxed. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I really underestimated you in the past. I never expected that your spells would actually be this powerful. I was indeed too lazy before. Mo Tiange teased her. Senior Marshal Sister, it's good that you know you're lazy. I know my innate talent isn't good, so I have no choice but to work hard. She looked at the starry sky again. It was already the hour of the morning. There's still 2 hours left. Senior Marshal Sister, we can get closer to the center. A hesitant expression appeared on Murong Yan's face. Are we going now? There should be a lot of people going to the center. Shouldn't we avoid them? Mo Tiange said, rest assured. We're close to the opening of the exit. Everyone wants to leave, so they definitely don't want to cause trouble. It'll actually be a bit safer than before. What Mo Tiange said was reasonable, so Murong Yen finally decided to believe her. She said straightforwardly, then I'll let Junior Marshal Brother Yi decide. I'll go with you. Mo Tiange nodded. Senior Marshal Sister, how are your injuries? Are you okay with hurrying along? Murong Yen said, they're fine. They're just minor injuries. Since Murong Yen was sure, Mo Tiange didn't hesitate. Then let's go. The two of them used the light body technique and hurried towards the center. The closer they got to the center, the more people there were. Murong Yen felt very uneasy. She asked in a low voice, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, are you really okay? Mo Tiange pulled her hand and gave her a smile. I'm fine. Trust me. Murong Yan's face suddenly turned red. In the end, she nodded. Mo Tiange, however, didn't notice. She was still holding Murong Yan's hand and rushing towards the exit. Chapter 69. There was a huge open space in the center of the forest. Many cultivators from the three groups had gathered around the open space. They were all staring at each other with vigilance. Mo Tiange arrived with Murong Yen. Everyone's gaze fell on them, but no one dared to make a move because they were afraid of breaking the balance. Although there were many Zixia sect disciples present, everyone cherished their lives. The disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school also didn't dare to make a move when they were obviously at a disadvantage. Otherwise, it would be too much of a loss if they lost their lives before killing their enemies. Without caring about these people's gazes, Mo Tiange found a corner close to her fellow disciples and pulled Murong Yen over. Seeing that the two of them were motionless, these people moved their gazes away from them and stared at the newcomers. Mo Tiange cautiously scanned the surroundings. Sure enough, Zixia sect's main branch suffered heavy losses. There were less than 100 people present. Including those who hadn't arrived yet, there were probably no more than 200. There were about 60 to 70 people from Yunwu sect and Jindao school. All of them were covered in blood and had fierce gazes. Among the people she knew, only Jiang Shanghang was present. Obviously, he had also experienced a bitter battle. Now, he found a place to meditate. As for the others, Qin Shi, Lu Yidao, and Su Jingji, none of them were present. Mo Tiange frowned slightly. She was a bit worried. Based on the number of people present, perhaps more than half of the cultivators died this time. She really couldn't be sure that those three people were still alive. At that moment, Murong Yen gently pulled her sleeve and whispered, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Seeing her pale face, Mo Tiange showed a comforting smile. Don't worry. In this place, Murong Yen knew that her methods and insight were inferior to Mo Tiange's, so she obediently listened to her. Mo Tiange looked up at the sky. The sky was already turning white. It was almost dawn. Once dawn arrived, the exit formation would appear here and they would be able to leave. Mo Tiange picked up a clean patch of grass and pulled Murong Yen to sit down. She seemed to be meditating and adjusting her breath like everyone else, but in fact, she was secretly observing the surroundings. She believed that many people present were as vigilant as she was. At the last moment, no one wanted to throw their lives away. Another group of Zixia sect cultivators arrived. Mo Tiange swept her gaze over them and frowned. She found that the old man who ran away from the poisonous spring was among them. However, she did not intend to take any action. Firstly, even though they had fought once, there was no enmity between them. Secondly, once she made a move, the balance would be broken. She still wanted to return alive. The old man also noticed her, and a look of surprise flashed across his face. Then, like her, he pretended not to see her. Presumably, many of the people present did the same. Revenge could be taken in the future, but it was not worth it to pay with their lives. More and more people came. When it was almost dawn, a few cultivators would come out of the forest from time to time and find their own camps. There were also enemies who appeared together, but they glared at each other angrily and did not make a move. Just when everyone was anticipating the opening of the formation, a loud shout suddenly rang out, "Damned girl, I've finally found you. Return my brother's life." Soon after, a figure pounced towards Muron Yen. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. She pulled Muron Yen up with one hand and used her greenwood sword with the other to block the opponent's attack. When he took a closer look, he discovered that it was the elder brother of the pair of brothers who had just captured Muron Yen. Oh no! Mo Tiange turned around to look. Sure enough, the atmosphere in the field changed. Everyone's gazes fell on them. Many people had already secretly taken out their spirit tools. She was extremely furious. This blockhead. Just now, when she heard the conversation between the two brothers, she already thought they were stupid. It seemed there was something wrong with their brains. She immediately took out an earth-splitting talisman with her other hand and threw it at him. Although this blockhead was slow, his reaction wasn't slow. He somersaulted and dodged her attack. Their actions ignited the atmosphere in an instant. Several Yunwu sect disciples wanted to help, so Zixia sect's side immediately took action. As a result, the two sides had already started fighting before they could arrive. Mo Tiange had no time to deal with the chaos. She looked up and saw that the blockhead had taken out a pigeon egg-sized purple ball and was about to throw it at her. She was instantly shocked. Muron Yan's complexion was even paler. They had seen the power of this thing with their own eyes. Once it was thrown, they definitely wouldn't be able to resist it. Seeing that the other party was about to throw the purple ball, Mo Tiange hurriedly took out a high-grade defensive talisman and slapped it on the talisman. A defensive barrier immediately appeared and covered the two of them. Boom! A deafening sound rang out, followed by the screams of other cultivators. Mo Tiange moved her spiritual aura, preparing to resist it. But in the next moment, the incoming force was easily blocked by her. Huh! She opened her eyes and was dumbfounded. Qin Shi gnashed his teeth and shouted, "Why are you in a daze? Come and help." He raised a sword, poured his spiritual aura on it, and stood in front of them. Mo Tiange felt as if she had just woken up from a dream. She hastily moved her spiritual aura to share part of the impact. After a while, the spiritual aura pressure finally subsided. Seeing that they actually blocked it, the blockhead shouted angrily and wanted to rush towards them again. Since she almost lost her life, how could Mo Tiange be polite to him? She immediately used an ice-condensing talisman. Muron Yen also didn't stay idle. She also rushed forward with her spirit tool. Qin Shi released a raging flame art. Although the blockhead's abilities weren't low, he couldn't withstand the three people's joint attack. In order to dodge the ice-condensing talisman, he was hit by Qin Shi's spell. His movements were a step too slow, so he was immediately hit by Muron Yan's spirit tool. He staggered and fell to the ground. Seeing that he was completely dead, the three of them heaved sighs of relief. The power of this purple ball was indeed extraordinary. Aside from them, the people around them were also caught in the crossfire. Some people were even badly mutilated by the explosion. Only a few people managed to block the impact. The dead and injured were all disciples of Yunwu sect and Jindao school. Although the instigator was already dead, each and every one of them was furious. They raised their spirit tools and rushed towards the Zixia sect disciples. Zixia sect disciples also had the advantage in numbers, so how could they be willing to show weakness? They also rushed forward. Spells and spirit tools were flying everywhere in the sky. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Qin Shi waved at them after dealing with a sneak attack. Mo Tiange was on guard as she pulled Muron Yen closer to him. Senior Marshal Brother Qin, thank you. Don't thank me so quickly. He took out a bunch of talismans as if they were free and gave them to the two of them. Hold on for a while. The exit will open in about a quarter of an hour. Mo Tiange also knew that this wasn't the time to be polite. She took the talismans he handed her, then turned around and threw a raging flame talisman at the Zixia sect disciples who were rushing towards them. This battle royale had the largest number of participants since the start of the day and night. It was also the most intense one. Spells, talismans, and spirit tools were flying everywhere. It was hard to tell whether they were on their own side or the enemy's side. They couldn't even dodge and could only use spells and talismans to resist. In the end, the three of them had no choice but to stick a defensive talisman on each of them to resist all kinds of attacks. Eventually, a white light shone in the center of the open space. This white light became brighter and brighter until it slowly formed the shape of a formation. It was overflowing with light and vibrant colors, and it was full of spiritual aura. Everyone's gazes were attracted by the formation. Even the fighting stopped. In a flash, everyone rushed towards the formation like a swarm of bees. Mo Tiange intentionally retreated a bit, but the people behind her also rushed forward. A group of people rushed towards the formation in a chaotic manner. Soon, they were squeezed into the formation. The scene in front of them changed. Mo Tiange raised her head. With a glance, she saw the three core formation cultivators with ashen complexions. Disciples came out of the cliff one after another. Almost every one of them was covered in blood and looked miserable. Some of them were even seriously injured. Murong Yen, who was next to her, leaned towards her and whispered, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, will we?" Mo Tiange shook her head and whispered back, "Don't worry." Although these core formation cultivators had ashen complexions, they didn't have any killing intent, so they probably wouldn't attack them. Besides, after the last battle royale, perhaps only 1/3 of the original disciples would come out alive. If they still had to be punished, they might as well recruit new disciples. Once they left the murderous environment and didn't need to be vigilant, Mo Tiange felt exhausted all over. Her body tilted and she almost fell down. But when she turned her head, she saw Murong Yen staring at the formation with rapt attention. Mo Tiange's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly remembered she hadn't told him about Murong Zi. "Senior Marshal Sister Murong," Murong Yen answered softly but didn't look at her. She was still staring at the formation. Mo Tiange took a deep breath. She suddenly hated herself for telling such cruel news. "In fact, I met Senior Marshal Brother Murong." Upon hearing this, Murong Yen suddenly turned her head. Mo Tiange clenched her teeth and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Murong has passed away." Murong Yen was dumbfounded. She seemed to be in disbelief, but soon, her face gradually turned pale. She suddenly grabbed Mo Tiange's hand and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, can you say that again?" Mo Tiange sighed and repeated, "I met Senior Marshal Brother Murong. He's already passed away." Murong Yan's face turned pale, but she didn't let go of her hand. Instead, she stared at Mo Tiange and asked, "Junior Marshal Brother, do you have any proof?" This time, Mo Tiange didn't say anything. She just handed Murong Zi's Qingquan bag to her. Murong Yen took it with trembling hands and opened it eagerly. When she saw those familiar spirit tools, she finally looked sad and let go of her hands to cover her face. Although she wasn't responsible for Murong Zi's death, he died while they were fighting against the enemy. Mo Tiange felt very uncomfortable seeing Murong Yen so sad. She patted her shoulder and shook his head. He seemed to be comforting her that this wasn't her responsibility. She forced a smile, but she didn't feel any better. "Senior Marshal Sister, don't be sad. Senior Marshal Brother always wanted you to build your foundation. You." At this point, she couldn't continue speaking. How could a few dry words of comfort compare to the sadness of losing a loved one? After a long time, Murong Yen finally put down her hands. There were no tears on her face. Her face was pale and her expression was gloomy. She used to be a charming, lovely girl, but after a series of blows recently, she was no longer as bright and beautiful as before. I'm sorry, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. It's not that I don't believe you, but I understand. Mo Tiange took out a jade box and handed it to her. This is Senior Marshal Brother Murong's ashes. Senior Marshal sister, don't be too sad. The dead are gone, so you should live better. Murong Yen accepted the jade box and the Qinkuan bag. A sad smile appeared on her face as she said, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, please tell me how my big brother died. Mo Tiange said, Senior Marshal Brother Murong and I happened to run into each other. He was attacked by someone and was seriously injured. While he was still recuperating, we ran into a second-rank iron-teethed crocodile, then we ran into 3 other people. In the end, Senior Marshal Brother Murong couldn't hold on any longer and died together with one of them. Mo Tiange simply explained, but she was still worried and emphasized, Senior Marshal sister, don't think about revenge. This hatred can't be settled. How could Murong Yen not understand this? It was just that she always felt unwilling. After a long time, she reached out to wipe the remaining tears on her face and said with a determined expression, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, don't worry. I'm no longer the insensible me from before. I know what I should do. Soon after, she laughed self-mockingly and said, although we weren't biological siblings, Big Brother always doted on me. No matter what I wanted, he always thought of a way to get it for me. Now, he thought of a way to get me foundation building pills, but I never expected the price would be his life. Chapter 70. The development of the matter was just as Mo Tiange expected. The person who came up with this idea originally thought it would be an opportunity for the disciples of the 3 groups to communicate, but he didn't expect it would turn into an opportunity to kill each other. Because of this, the nascent soul grandmaster of Zixia sect flew into a rage and almost killed the person who came up with this idea. However, it was already a long time before these aura-refining disciples learned about this. On the day they finished their test, the 3 core formation grandmasters were livid. After hearing the disciples' reports, they sent several foundation-building disciples to clean up the mess. These foundation-building disciples found some seriously injured aura-refining disciples and also reported the tragic situation left behind in the mountain forest. Soon after, the core formation grandmasters discussed something, but they didn't say anything. They just took them back to the sect and ordered them not to go down the mountain. After Senior Marshal Brother Zhou inquired about it, he told them not to worry and finally appeased some people. During this test, their courtyard lost a lot of people. Mo Tiange's house was considered good. Out of 5 people, 4 came out alive. The one who didn't come out was Su Jingji. Lu Yidao was seriously injured, but in the end, he still survived. Su Jingji, on the other hand, disappeared. No one knew who killed him or where his body and ashes were. There was no trace of him. In this disaster, many people disappeared like this, but they didn't expect Su Jingji to be one of them. After receiving confirmation, Su clan's people came to clean up his things. Thus, Su Jingji's traces completely disappeared from this house. Soon after, the sect head announced the results of this test. Just as they guessed, there was no investigation or disposal. Instead, he directly announced the distribution of foundation building pills. In this test, no more than 100 Yunwu sect disciples came out alive, but 40 of them obtained foundation building pills. Reportedly, because the elite disciples suffered heavy losses, the nascent soul grandmaster of Zixia sect decided to distribute more foundation building pills, hoping to produce more foundation building cultivators among them to make up for this loss. The 4 people in Mo Tiange's house, including Murong Yen, were among them. However, this news didn't make Mo Tiange happy. Murong Zi's death and Su Jingji's disappearance made her feel unprecedentedly lost. She remembered Su Jingji's irritable appearance before the test that day. In fact, she had a bad premonition that day, but she didn't think too much about it. She never expected it would be an eternal farewell. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Mo Tiange, who was leaning against a tree, raised her head and saw Qin Shi standing in front of her with a wine bottle in his hand. She forced a smile and took it. Qin Shi also sat down next to her, and the two of them drank in silence. It was an autumn afternoon. The sunlight seeped through the leaves and shone on the body, making people lazy and unwilling to move. The surroundings were quiet, and only the distant waterfall added a little liveliness. Thinking back to a month ago, there were 8 people chatting here, a group of people ordering her around. But now, Su Jingji was dead, Lu Yidao was seriously injured, Wang Qianyi was married far away, Shen Bing used her beauty to seduce people, Murong Yan was determined to cultivate assiduously, and senior martial brother Zhou was busy with his future. The only one who could come here and sit with her was Qin Shi. Senior brother Qin. If you build your foundation, what will you do? Of course it's to continue cultivating. Why do you ask? Mo Tiange shook her head. She couldn't tell why she was feeling so vexed. I just don't understand. What's the purpose of cultivating in the end? What was the purpose of cultivation? 80% of the people in the cultivation world would answer this question without hesitation: to live a long life. But what was the purpose of living a long life? Fighting each other like this, causing countless deaths and injuries. For the sake of living a long life, why didn't they care about life at all? Qin Shi thought about it seriously, but he didn't answer. He just shook his head and slowly talked about something irrelevant. I was born in a noble family in the secular world. However, because I was from a branch family, I was never valued and was always bullied by others. I don't know why, but ever since I was a child, I felt that I was different from others. I didn't want to fight for favor with my brothers, and I didn't have any interest in playing. I only focused on studying. When I was 8 years old, a guest came to our manor. He was said to be our ancestor, and he seemed to be an extraordinary person. He was already several hundred years old, but he didn't look old at all. In front of him, even the most dignified clan master didn't dare to utter a word. Then, I was brought to him. After he tested my spiritual roots, he told the elders that he wanted to take me away. At that time, I was still young and didn't know what I was looking forward to. I just suddenly felt that maybe this was the path I wanted to walk. At this point, he turned around and smiled. Sure enough, my premonition was correct. I walked on a completely different path from my brothers in the manor. I'm still young now, but those brothers and sisters of mine have already turned into dust. Why do we cultivate? I can't answer this question. For me, cultivating is a natural part of my life. I don't need to ask why. I just want to walk on this path. His quiet narration made Mo Tiange feel very calm. His experiences had also allowed her to see herself in him. Just want to walk on this path. Is that it? She pressed her forehead and said in a low voice, I don't know why I walked on this path. I was young and intelligent, so I knew how to read people's faces. I was used to the fickleness of human nature, and I always felt pain in my heart. At that time, I only hated myself for knowing these things and why I couldn't be like other children. Later, when I met second uncle, I realized I was really different from other children. Cultivation? I also don't know why, but second uncle told me that without strength, there's no freedom. Without strength, there's no freedom, Qin Shi murmured and repeated. His gaze on her suddenly had a lot of complicated feelings. Mo Tiange threw the bottle of wine away after she finished it. In fact, she never drank because she wasn't in the mood and didn't have the chance. Second uncle didn't drink because he said that cultivators couldn't indulge in worldly things, so she also thought the same. However, this feeling of drinking wine made her feel very comfortable. Senior martial brother Qin, that elder of yours should have left you by now, right? Qin Shi paused but didn't say anything. In fact, second uncle's lifespan is almost up. If it's not this year, it'll be next year. Sometimes I think I can accept it calmly, but sometimes I find it hard to imagine. If second uncle is gone, what should I do? If I'm like senior martial brother Su, suddenly disappearing without even saying goodbye, what should I do? She hugged herself and buried her head in her arms, not daring to continue. Qin Shi wanted to pat her shoulder, but he hesitated and his hand didn't fall. In the end, he said, "I'm different from you. In fact, my aptitude isn't the best, but I've never encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation. Great-grandfather said that maybe I was born to cultivate, so I don't have any obsessions or ties. In other words, I don't have superfluous feelings. I can't understand how you feel, but I know you have a heavy attachment to your feelings. If you can't let go, you won't have any achievements in the future." Mo Tiango was stunned. "Obsession," Qin sighed and finally patted her shoulder. "This is all I can say. Whether you can do it or not, it's up to you. Cultivation. Maybe for you, there are a lot of things you have to give up." Mo Tiango thought hard. "Obsession. Because I've longed for too much since I was a child, I have an obsession." She seemed to understand, but she was also a bit confused. She handed her another bottle of wine. "Don't think too much. If you could figure it out so easily, it wouldn't be an obsession. This requires fated chances, so take your time." After drinking another bottle of wine, her head became even more dizzy. In a daze, she heard Qin teasing her. "Junior Marshall Brother Yi, you've never drunk wine before? Who drinks it like water like you do?" In a daze, Mo Tiango raised her head and saw that there seemed to be several Qin's eyes swaying in front of her. She tilted her head and reached out to hold his head. "Senior. Marshall Brother Qin, what's wrong? Do you know phantom technique?" She was stunned for a moment, then he burst into laughter. In the end, he laughed so hard that he hit the ground. "You. If I knew this earlier, I would have made you drink earlier." Unexpectedly, Mo Tiango stared at him for a while, then stood up and walked unsteadily towards the water. She shouted from behind her, "Junior Marshall Brother Yi, what do you want to do?" She was still swaying as she walked. Wash my face." She walked to the edge of the pool and crouched down. When she saw her reflection in the water, she was suddenly stunned. She hadn't paid attention to her appearance for a long time. Today, she finally realized that it was very different from what she remembered. Her originally sparse eyebrows now had eyebrows, the outline of her face seemed to have deepened, and her cheeks were plump. She already had the appearance of an adult. Although her head was still muddled, she was still frightened because her face looked more and more like a woman's. "Junior Marshall Brother Yi, are you done?" Hearing the voice behind her, she hurriedly held the water to wash her face, but the face she saw was still bright and beautiful. She was afraid Qin would discover her, so she didn't dare to look back. She panicked and thought, could it be that someone has noticed me? "Junior Marshall Brother Yi," her foot slipped, and she suddenly lost her balance and fell into the pool with a plop. "Junior Marshall Brother Yi." This scene made Qin dumbfounded. After a while, he saw Mo Tiango struggling in the water, so he finally regained his composure. He sprang up and instantly grabbed her, who was floating in the water, and went back to the shore. He couldn't help but shake his head. "Junior Marshall Brother Yi, you've really drunk yourself silly. As a cultivator, you actually drowned. Where's your light body technique?" He looked down and felt even more helpless. This wasn't just an ordinary kind of silly. She actually choked on water and fainted. She put Mo Tiango down under the tree. He thought for a moment, then raised his hand. In his hand was a bright-colored peach branch. The peach blossoms were still blooming, and there was dew in the center of the stamen as if they had just been plucked from the tree. He muttered a few words in a low voice. Finally, he waved his hand and shouted, "Go." Soon after, the two of them disappeared into thin air. From Qin's point of view, the two of them were still in their original place. It was just that there was a faint light barrier surrounding this small area. He lowered his head to look at the unconscious Mo Tiango. A thoughtful expression appeared on his face. After a long time, he stretched his hand to her wet neck and felt around. Soon, he pulled out a jade pendant strung with a red string. It was a round jade pendant with a warm color and clear cloud patterns. He sighed. Sure enough. Chapter 71. When Immerse woke up from her sleep, she felt a splitting headache. She propped herself up. The room was dark, so she rubbed her head in a daze. Strange, how did I fall asleep? She sat up and circulated her energy to cultivate a small circle. Only then did her head stop hurting. She also slowly remembered what happened before she fell asleep. No, it should be before she got drunk. How shameful. She never drank before, yet she tried to drown her sorrows with alcohol. The worst thing was that she actually forgot herself after getting drunk. She groaned and fell back. Fortunately, there was only Senior Marshal Brother Chin at that time, so no one saw Senior Marshal Brother Chin. She hurriedly sat up and touched her body. Fortunately, her clothes were intact, and the psychic jade pendant was still there. She breathed a sigh of relief, but she felt a bit regretful. She didn't remember what happened before she got drunk. She only vaguely remembered that she told her to let go of her obsession to continue on the path of cultivation, but she felt like she forgot something. She thought for a long time, but she really couldn't remember, so she simply ignored it. Since she couldn't remember, it wasn't important. What was important was that she had to warn herself that she couldn't relax her vigilance like this again. Fortunately, she didn't do anything to her. Otherwise, her secret might have been exposed if it was someone else. With this thought in mind, she got out of bed to freshen up. She then took out several moonstones from her chinkuan bag and threw them on the bed. The room instantly became bright. Although her clothes were intact, they were wrinkled and smelled of alcohol. Immerse frowned and walked to the washstand in the corner. She then took off her coat and wiped her face. When the smell of alcohol dissipated, she took out her new clothes and put them on. She was about to untie her hair and comb it again when she suddenly saw her reflection in the bronze mirror. She froze. She thought for a moment, picked up the comb, scattered her hair, carefully parted it and coiled it into a bun. During this process, her hair was combed crookedly several times because of her rusty technique. When she finished, she couldn't help but smile bitterly at herself in the mirror. She hadn't dressed as a woman for almost 10 years, and she didn't even know how to comb her hair. The person in the mirror was unpleasant no matter how she looked at it. She then scattered her hair again and combed it into an ordinary Taoist bun. However, the face in the mirror was still too handsome for a man. After thinking for a while, she rummaged through her chinkuan bag and found a few things. First, he used a long black strip to thicken his eyebrows. Then, he poured out some gray powder from a jade bottle and smeared it on his nose, the corners of his eyes, and his lower jaw. Now that she looked at the person in the mirror, she noticed that he had sharper facial features and thicker eyebrows. He looked more like a man. He carefully erased some of the traces before putting the items away. These 2 items were actually smithing materials. But since they weren't poisonous, it wouldn't matter if he used them to wipe his face. The most important thing was that the foundation building pill was right in front of him, so he had to be a bit more careful. Once she was done with everything, she returned to the bedside and took out her chinkuan bag from inside her robe. She tidied it up then sat down cross-legged to cultivate. Actually, she had gained many things from this trial. Just the corpses of the demonic beasts were already a great fortune. There were also pills, spirit tools, and all kinds of materials. Just the spirit stones alone amounted to over 1,000 pieces. Immerse felt quite conflicted after she returned. Working hard for several years wasn't as good as killing a few people. Fortunately, she suppressed the injustice in her heart in time. If she ignored this ruthless thought, it would lead her to become a devil in the future. Unknowingly, several hours passed. The sky outside was already bright. Immerse withdrew her spiritual aura, jumped out of bed, tidied up her clothes, opened the door, and walked out. Outside the hall, she was sitting in his usual position, drawing talismans. When he heard her voice, he didn't even raise his head. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you finally woke up. Thinking about yesterday, Mo Tiange felt a bit uneasy. Seeing that his expression wasn't abnormal, she finally felt relieved and said, "What's wrong?" "To get the foundation building pill." She put away his brush and paper. When he turned his head, he was stunned. His reaction made Mo Tiange a bit nervous. Was the makeup on my face too obvious? After a while, she shook his head. "I'm really muddle-headed. I feel like you're a bit different today, but I can't see what's different." Mo Tiange felt a bit relieved. She smiled dryly. "How could it be? Aren't we getting the foundation building pill? Let's go." She nodded. The two of them walked out together. While walking behind them, Mo Tiange secretly wiped her sweat. Originally, the four of them always moved together in this room. Now that Su Jingji wasn't here and Lu Yidao was being treated by the foundation building seniors in the North Peak because of his serious injuries, this room suddenly became a lot more deserted. If this wasn't the case, she wouldn't necessarily be so close to her. It was only because the others were gone that they had no one to talk to except each other. The south peak of Mount Yunwu was still the same as before. The morning light shone faintly and a cool breeze caressed their faces. However, two of the people who used to travel with them were missing. Mo Tiange sighed softly. When they reached the steward's hall, there were already a lot of people waiting in line. The two of them obediently waited outside. Soon, it was Mo Tiange's turn. She walked in and handed over her identity tablet. After the identity tablet was verified, she left a spiritual aura imprint on another jade slip before she cautiously took a jade bottle from the steward's martial uncle and carefully put it away. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this was the lifeblood of aura refining disciples. The other disciples who received the foundation building pill were all ecstatic, but she was still relatively calm. When she also received the foundation building pill, the two of them went back together. "Senior Martial Brother Qin, you've reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm for quite some time, right? Do you want to enter closed door meditation immediately?" "I should." "What about you, Junior Martial Brother?" I'd better wait for a while. I haven't reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm yet. It won't be too late to enter closed door meditation after I'm a bit more confident." "That's good too." After they returned, Mo Tiange and she went back to their respective rooms. Mo Tiange stayed in her room for a while before she opened the door again, preparing to go down the mountain. After receiving the foundation building pill, this matter was officially over. The prohibition against disciples leaving the monastery without permission was also lifted. She naturally had to go down the mountain to see second uncle first. However, since she just received the foundation building pill, she was afraid she'd be targeted by others, so she pretended to come back to pack her things before setting foot on the road down the mountain. She first went to Yunwu Sek's shop to exchange the spirit stones she consigned for medicinal pills. She also sold the demonic beast corpses she obtained this time. During this period of time, there would be a lot of people selling demonic beast corpses, so she wasn't afraid of being too conspicuous. On the other hand, when the shop assistant saw the pile of corpses, he felt great admiration. This assistant was also a disciple of Yunwu sect, so he naturally knew about the competition this time. Since there were so many demonic beast corpses, the person who obtained them must be someone with superb skills. Therefore, he didn't dare to be negligent and respectfully gave her the spirit stones. Mo Tiange took the bag of spirit stones. She didn't count it and just threw a spirit stone as a reward. After that, she returned to second uncle's small courtyard after making many turns. Second uncle. A cough came from inside the room. Mo Tiange pushed the door open and saw an old man with a face full of wrinkles on the bed. She revealed a smile and said, "Second uncle, I'm back." Yi Jiang raised his eyelids and looked at her for a long time with his cloudy eyes. He then coughed and said with a hoarse voice, "Xiao Tian, you're not injured, are you?" "I'm fine." Mo Tiange hastily shook her head and sat on the small stool beside the bed. She then took out the jade bottle containing the foundation building pill and said happily, "Second uncle, look. I got the foundation building pill." Seeing the jade bottle, Yi Jiang took it with trembling hands. He opened the jade bottle and sniffed it. He then closed his eyes and nodded. "Yes, this is the foundation building pill." "Xiao Tian, you've worked hard." Mo Tiange repeatedly shook her head. "I'm just lucky. There was an accident in this test, so it was much easier to distribute the foundation building pills." Yi Jiang showed a loving smile and looked at her with pity. "Do you think second uncle doesn't know what happened?" "You. Forget it. It's good that you came out alive." His reproachful tone was actually warm and caring. She held second uncle's already withered hand and smiled sincerely. "Second uncle, you don't have to worry. I'm very powerful now. I diligently cultivate every day and I've also learned how to fight against others. I won't be soft-hearted anymore. Second uncle, I'm telling you, in this test." After spending 2 hours, Mo Tiange rambled on about what happened in this test. Yi Jiang smiled as he listened. Sometimes he praised her for her calmness in handling things, and other times, he gave her careful pointers, telling her how to handle things better. Mo Tiange felt she gained more from this conversation than she did from her own experience. With this thought in mind, she felt a bit depressed. If it wasn't for second uncle, what would she do? When she finished talking, Yi Jiang sighed and said, "Xiao Tian, you've really grown up from the way you handled things this time." Second uncle is relieved. "Even if you can't build your foundation this time, you're still young. It shouldn't be a problem for you to try a few more times." His words were like his last words. Mo Tiange bit her lip, grabbed second uncle's hand and whispered, "Second uncle, how could Yi Jiang not know what she was thinking?" He smiled and stroked her head. "Don't be like this. You're already an adult. You don't need second uncle by your side. If you form your gold core one day, go back to the Yi clan in the secular world and see if there are any descendants with spiritual roots. If there are, you don't need to rebuild the Yi clan. You can just pass down cultivation techniques." "Second uncle," she shouted angrily. Yi Jiang's expression turned serious and he said sternly, "Xiao Tian, it's not that you don't have to face it if you don't mention it. You have to remember that you're a cultivator, and a female cultivator at that. If you can't even accept reality, how can you go on? It's much more difficult for a female cultivator to achieve something than a male cultivator. Your aptitude isn't outstanding, and you don't have any clan elders to rely on. If you don't have a firm heart, you might as well give up early." Second uncle had never spoken to her in such a harsh tone. Mo Tiange was stunned. She lowered her head but didn't say anything. Yi Jiang softened his tone. "Do you still remember what second uncle has taught you all these years? You don't have good aptitude and you don't have a backer, so you have to be stricter with yourself. You can't be weak, you can't be greedy, and you can't indulge in emotions. You have to remember that weakness and passion are the enemies of female cultivators. Not only today, but you also have to calmly accept second uncle's death. If you fall in love with him in the future, you have to restrain yourself. You have to know that people are fickle and the world is unpredictable." How could she not know this? But Yi Jiang once again closed his eyes and revealed a calm smile. "Life and death are part of the heavenly Tao's reincarnation cycle. You and I are both cultivators, so we should understand the principle that the heavenly Tao's cycle is endless. Cultivators, and only when you cultivate the heavenly Tao can you become a true immortal. Go back and carefully comprehend it. When you can calmly face second uncle's death, you can come see me again." Mo Tiange was silent. After a long time, she finally gave him the medicinal pills, bid him farewell, and left. Weakness and passion are the enemies of female cultivators. The heavenly Tao's cycle is endless. Only when you cultivate the heavenly Tao can you become a true immortal. Mo Tiange stood in the courtyard and closed her eyes for a moment before she resolutely walked out. Chapter 72. After obtaining the foundation building pill, Qin Shi really did as he said and went into closed-door meditation to make a breakthrough. On the north peak of Mount Yunwu, there were some places with especially abundant spiritual aura. Most of these places were the Immortals' caves of high-level cultivators, but there were also a few places that were opened as public Immortals' caves. The so-called public Immortals' cave was an Immortals' cave that everyone could use. However, they would have to pay a considerable amount of rent to the sect. However, if it was for the sake of building one's foundation, it would be completely free, and one would even have priority. These public Immortals' caves were protected by formations both inside and outside, and there were also foundation building cultivators guarding them in shifts. Under normal circumstances, unless the time limit for closed-door meditation was over a year, no one would be disturbed at all. It was indeed the best place for closed-door meditation to attack the foundation building realm. Going into seclusion to build his foundation would take at least 3 to 5 months, and at most a year. The first 2 months were used to nourish his body. Then, he would eat a foundation establishment pill and spend a few more months to absorb and adapt to it. If he built his foundation, he would have to spend more time to stabilize his cultivation. Whether Qin Shi succeeded or failed, it would take him a year and a half before he could come out of closed-door meditation. Mo Tiange, on the other hand, didn't think much of it. She was just envious and bored. What she envied was that before Qin Shi left, his expression was calm and without the slightest bit of worry. He seemed to be very confident, so he must have learned some kind of secret technique. As for Mo Tiange, she herself still had to spend a year or two to reach the peak stage of the aura refining realm and increase her chances of building her foundation. What was boring was that Qin Shi wasn't here, so she had no one to talk to. Lu Yidao's injuries were quite heavy, so he would have to stay in the North Peak for at least 3 to 5 months. Muro Mian, with the help of her clan, also went to a public Immortals' cave to enter closed-door meditation in order to advance to the peak stage of the aura refining realm. There was another person whom Qin Shi was slightly familiar with, Senior Marshal Brother Zhou. However, just like Qin Shi, he also obtained a foundation building pill and went to a public Immortals' cave to enter closed-door meditation in order to advance to the foundation building realm. If he wasn't too unlucky and ended up in the 12th layer of the aura refining realm, he would have been Marshal Uncle Zhou in the future. As for Jiang Shangheng, who was the only one left in the room, she simply didn't count him among her acquaintances. Ever since the matter of the school being annexed happened, not only did this guy ignore her, but he also became even more gloomy. Speaking of which, it was strange. When Jiang Shangheng first entered the school, he was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. Now that Qin Shi had gone into closed-door meditation to make a breakthrough, why didn't he make any movements? Of course, she wouldn't ask Jiang Shangheng out of curiosity. After all, they weren't friends. Actually, after this trial, if she wanted to go to a public cave for closed-door meditation, she also had money. From the cosmos bags he obtained, there were more than 1,000 spirit stones. The demonic beasts he hunted were sold for another 1,000 spirit stones. In addition, some unimportant materials and spirit tools were sold for several hundred spirit stones. Altogether, there were more than 3,000 spirit stones. Coupled with medicinal pills, some spirit tools that weren't convenient to sell, and possibly useful materials, she was now unprecedentedly rich. She wasn't inferior to ordinary foundation building cultivators at all. However, she felt that it was better to keep a low profile. She didn't even take out the corpse of the iron-toothed crocodile. Of course, she wouldn't do something as extravagant as renting an Immortals' cave. Thus, the days returned to tranquility. Every day, he would cultivate and occasionally listen to sermons. He didn't even take any errands in the steward's hall. Fortunately, after this incident, the school exempted disciples in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm and above from doing chores, so it didn't matter if he didn't take any errands. After being reprimanded by second uncle and losing contact with him, he was unprecedentedly focused on his cultivation. Coupled with the large amount of medicinal pills he consumed, it only took him 3 months to reach the aura refining perfection stage. She herself was rather surprised by this. She hadn't expected herself to have such a cultivation speed. Lu Yidao was still in the North Peak. She heard a martial uncle admired him very much and wanted to accept him as his disciple. Upon hearing this news, she suddenly realized she hadn't seen Lu Yidao for a long time. After thinking about it carefully, it seemed they had become a lot more distant. In the end, she felt a bit guilty, so she decided to find some time to visit Lu Yidao. However, this plan didn't come true in the end because she was stopped when she went to the North Peak. She could only ask a senior martial brother to pass her a message and transfer several unimportant things to him. She gradually heard about the reason why Jiang Shanghang didn't attempt to build his foundation. As it turned out, Jiang clan had a kind of medicinal pill that could assist in building one's foundation. It could increase one's chances of building one's foundation, but it wasn't easy to concoct. Only a small amount of medicinal pills were produced each time. Originally, with Jiang Shanghang's diligence and cultivation level, he should have been able to obtain one. Unfortunately, he was despised in Jiang clan. Moreover, Jiang Qingxian, a direct descendant of the current clan head, was also going to build his foundation this time, so Jiang Shanghang's share was given to Jiang Qingxian. Jiang Shanghang could only grit his teeth and accept the result. Foundation building pills weren't easy to obtain, so he planned to endure until the next batch of medicinal pills was made. What Jiang Shanghang said was pure speculation, but in any case, they had known each other for more than 3 years. Based on Jiang Shanghang's personality, it was very likely he would think that way. Mo Tiange felt a bit envious when she heard this news. There was actually a medicinal pill that could increase one's chances of building one's foundation. However, since this kind of medicinal pill existed, the sect had never heard of it. It wasn't that the pill recipe was too complicated or the materials were too rare, so they couldn't be provided to ordinary disciples. Even Jiang Shanghang couldn't obtain Jiang clan's things, let alone her. Therefore, she could only be envious. When she reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm and her cultivation couldn't advance any further, Mo Tiange went down the mountain. Although second uncle severely reprimanded her last time and ordered her not to see him until she figured it out, Mo Tiange still came to see him once every half a month. However, second uncle only said a few words to her before he drove her back to the mountain. This time, however, it was different. She had something very important to say. Second uncle. Yi Jiang, who was still recuperating in the small room, looked even older. When he heard her voice, he didn't even open his eyes. Why did you come here? Go back and cultivate. Mo Tiange didn't give up. She said, second uncle, I've reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm. Yi Jiang finally opened his eyes. After sizing her up, a faint smile appeared on his face. 3 months. That's more like it. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that second uncle finally didn't look so tense anymore. She sat in front of the bed as usual and asked, second uncle, are you all right? I won't die for the time being. Upon seeing her worried expression, Yi Jiang's heart finally softened. He said slowly, second uncle's injuries have been very good recently. I reckon he can hold on until next year. Mo Tiange lowered her head in silence. This was indeed good news. 2 years ago, second uncle said that his lifespan was only 2 or 3 years. Now, at least, he could confirm that it was the longer one. Alright, since you've reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm, you should strive to build your foundation. Are you ready to build your foundation? Mo Tiange shook her head, feeling very confused. Second uncle, I can feel that my cultivation level is no longer a problem, but I'm still lacking something if I enter closed-door meditation to build my foundation. What is it? Yi Jiang muttered, second uncle has already explained to you how to build your foundation and made you familiar with the process. Logically speaking, you should be well prepared. Do you have any doubts? After hesitating for a moment, Mo Tiange nodded and said, whenever I think about building my foundation, I always feel flustered. I don't have any confidence at all. I guess so. Yi Jiang understood. It seems that you weren't mentally prepared. This is a bit difficult. If you forcibly enter closed-door meditation to build your foundation, your mentality will be unstable, and your state will also be unstable, which will affect the success of building your foundation. Yes, I can't make up my mind to enter closed-door meditation immediately. Second uncle, what should I do? Yi Jiang said, it's no wonder you feel that way. Most people cultivate until the peak stage of the aura refining realm and wait a long time for foundation building pills, so they're fully prepared. But because of second uncle, you're in a hurry to cultivate until the peak stage of the aura refining realm and are about to build your foundation. Then what should I do? Yi Jiang closed his eyes as if he was thinking. Mo Tiange stared at him anxiously. She knew that although second uncle's situation was a bit better than she expected, he only had 1 year left to live. She wanted second uncle to see her build her foundation before he passed away and leave with peace of mind. Therefore, she couldn't afford to delay this 1 year. Yi Jiang finally opened his eyes. He seemed to have made a decision. After staring at her for a long time, he said slowly, Tiange, you should leave the mountain and travel around for a while. Huh? Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. Travel? Doesn't that mean I have to leave Mount Yunwu and second uncle? Yi Jiang nodded. Yes. Whenever a cultivator is stuck in a bottleneck or their state of mind is unstable, traveling is the best solution. But, Mo Tiange said anxiously, wouldn't that mean I have to leave this place? Second uncle, how can I leave you here alone? Yi Jiang showed a faint smile. Are you worried that second uncle will suddenly die here? Mo Tiange was speechless. She was indeed afraid. She was afraid that if second uncle passed away, she still wouldn't be able to build her foundation. However, she was even more afraid that second uncle would finish his last journey alone while she was gone. Yi Jiang sighed. Rest assured. When the end of a cultivator's lifespan is near, their perception of destiny will also become stronger. After making this decision, second uncle feels that he can still wait until you come back. Go. If you stay, I'm afraid it'll take more time. Second uncle, be obedient. Mo Tiange struggled for a long time but still shook her head resolutely. No. What if something unexpected happens? I won't go. What if you have to go? I absolutely won't go. Yi Jiang closed his eyes as if he didn't want to argue with her anymore. He knew how stubborn this child was. When he was seriously injured while hunting demonic beasts, his companions threw him on the road. It was this child who ran into the forest to find him regardless of her life. In the end, the two of them escaped from a life and death situation. Xiao Tian, take second uncle's natal primordial spirit tablet and go on your way. Mo Tiange was startled, but she only called out in a daze, second uncle. Yi Jiang closed his eyes and sighed. If anything happens to second uncle, you'll know when you see that primordial spirit tablet. Do you feel relieved now? Yi Jiang didn't say anything else to her. He took out a jade tablet from his robe, made a hand seal with his right hand and muttered something. A moment later, a drop of bright blood appeared between his eyebrows. He sped up his chanting and made a cut with his fingertip. The drop of blood instantly followed his hand and entered the jade tablet. The jade tablet immediately turned from white to dark red. After doing this, Yi Jiang coughed violently several times. Second uncle. Mo Tiange hastily supported him and patted his back. After a while, Yi Jiang regained his breath. He waved his hand and handed the jade tablet to her. If something happens to me, the natal blood essence inside it will be lost. If you see its color change, you can come back immediately. Mo Tiange silently took it. It seemed that second uncle had made up his mind to give her a natal jade tablet. Yi Jiang waved his hand and ordered her to go back. He said, all right, go back to the sect and report this. Pack your things and go out to travel. Remember, open your mind and don't think about cultivating. Come back in half a year. Mo Tiange was silent for a moment. A moment later, a decisive expression appeared on her face as she nodded. I understand, second uncle. Chapter 73. It was normal for cultivators to travel when they reached a bottleneck. Many aura refining disciples who reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm but felt they were still lacking in the foundation building realm would choose to travel. Therefore, Mo Tiange only needed to report to the steward's hall to get permission. Traveling wasn't a sightseeing tour, but a search for fated chances. Fated chances sometimes had a greater impact on cultivators than aptitude. For example, 1,000 years ago, there was a cultivator with poor aptitude who unexpectedly reached the nascent soul realm and possessed great divine power, allowing him to move unhindered in Kunwu for a while. Of course, fated chances were also hard to come by. Fated chances like this only appeared once in many years. For most people, being able to obtain some spiritual plants or spiritual objects or have an epiphany that allowed them to break through their bottlenecks was already extremely good. Mo Tiange didn't have such a delusion. With her aptitude, if she relied on unobtainable fated chances, she probably wouldn't make a realm breakthrough even if she had 800 years of lifespan. Moreover, to be exact, her situation wasn't a bottleneck but an unstable state of mind. Because she was pressed for time and her aptitude was too poor, she didn't have any hope of successfully building her foundation, so she couldn't calm down. After thinking for a long time, Mo Tiange felt it was better to go to some big cultivation groups and communicate with their disciples. In any case, she was still young and had already obtained a foundation building pill, so there was no need for her to take risks for fated chances. With that decided, she bid farewell to second uncle and left Mount Yunwu. This was her first time traveling alone. Ever since she came to Kunwu, she had never left second uncle to go on a trip alone. However, she was no longer the little girl who came to Kunwu for the first time. She had seen a lot and was confident she could handle any situation she encountered. Mount Yunwu was located in a small corner of East Kunwu. Before it was annexed, there were only Zixia sect and Jindao school nearby. The nearest cultivation group was also thousands of miles away. Aside from some small cultivation groups, the closest one was undoubtedly the head of Kunwu's 7 great cultivation groups, Righteous Path's Tiandao sect. The 7 great cultivation groups in Kunwu were Tiandao sect, Xianqing school, Gujin sect, Biyun sect, Jingfa school, Lingshou sect, and Danding school. Among them, the Spirit Beast sect and the Danding school, one was a beast-taming sect and the other was a pill-concocting sect. Both of them were unorthodox sects, and they only had slightly more people than the middle-level cultivation sections. However, because these two sects were quite skilled in beast-taming and pill-concocting, their sects were much stronger than the middle-level cultivation sections. Therefore, they were ranked as one of the 7 great sections. The stronger ones were the Biyun sect and the Zhengfa sect. Zhengfa sect was a Daoist sect. Most of the disciples in the sect were dressed as Daoist priests. However, Baiyun's sect was a peculiar sect. The disciples recruited by the sect were all very beautiful regardless of whether they were male or female. There were many female disciples, so there were many dual cultivation partners in the sect. After them were Gujin's sect and Xianqing school. Gujin's sect was a cultivation group for sword cultivators. Sword cultivators spent their entire lives cultivating only one sword, and most of their divine abilities were focused on one sword. Sword cultivators had always been a bit more powerful than ordinary cultivators in fights of magical power, but it was also harder for them to make a realm breakthrough. Therefore, although Gujin sect's high-level cultivators were only about the same as Jingfa school and Biyun school, their strength was actually a bit higher. Gujin sect had always been considered to be on par with Xianqing school. Xianqing school's strength was second only to Tiandao sect. Like Zhengfa school, it was also a Dao school. For several thousand years, Tiandao sect had always been regarded as the leader of the righteous path in Kunwu. It was located in the northeast of Kunwu and was separated from the devil path by a mountain. Tiandao sect was different from other cultivation groups. Its unique characteristic was that it didn't have any unique characteristics. It didn't have any cultivation techniques, and it didn't force its disciples to cultivate anything. Unorthodox cultivation techniques were fine, and it didn't even care if they cultivated devil cultivation techniques as long as they didn't violate the sect's commandments. Tiandao's sect's strength was precisely due to its tolerant management method. Every Tiandao sect disciple was treated equally regardless of what they cultivated, so there were many special talents in the sect. Mo Tiange wanted to go to Tiandao's sect because it was the leader of the righteous path and its disciples cultivated a variety of things. Not only could she gain more experience, but she also didn't have to worry about any accidents. Although there were no absolute righteous people among cultivators, people of the righteous path still didn't encourage fighting, so it would be a bit safer to interact with disciples of the righteous path. Not far from Mount Yunwu, Mo Tiange found a place to change out of Yunwu's sect's disciple uniform and put on very ordinary clothes. Yunwu's sect had already been annexed by Zixia sect, and that unforeseen event happened a month ago, so it was better for her to be a bit more cautious. Soon after, she used the light body technique and headed northeast. In the past, when she wandered with second uncle, Mo Tiange once met a cultivator who was actually a martial artist in the secular world who entered the Tao through martial arts. She was very interested in their so-called martial arts and body techniques, so she learned some of them. In the past few years, from the Immortals Assembly to the foundation building pill competition, she benefited a lot. When she used the light body technique, she was also faster than ordinary cultivators. In less than half a month, she arrived at the boundary of Tiandao's sect. Tiandao's sect's sphere of influence was very large. This area already belonged to it. In fact, there were only a few small cultivation groups attached to it in the surrounding area. However, the market square here was very special. It actually held a Dao assembly at a fixed time and invited foundation building cultivators from Tiandao's sect to participate. Anyone could participate in this Dao assembly as long as they paid the entrance spirit stones. Moreover, they could raise questions to the cultivator giving the lecture and discuss the Dao with each other. Mo Tiange was very interested in this Dao assembly. Since the entrance fee wasn't expensive, she waited here. In addition, she also sold some spirit tools that weren't convenient to sell near Mount Yunwu in batches. Because the flow of people here was quite complicated and it was quite a distance from Mount Yunwu, these spirit tools were sold smoothly and earned her a lot of spirit stones. After coming out of a shop, Mo Tiange turned a corner and took off her robe. She changed her appearance and revealed her true appearance. When she went to the shops to sell spirit tools, she used the transfiguration technique to disguise herself into various different appearances because she still couldn't let people know the origin of these spirit tools. Besides, these shops didn't care whether the customers used the transfiguration technique or not. It was fine as long as they couldn't see her true appearance. She leisurely walked around the corner and released her divine sense. She didn't find anything unusual, so she faintly smiled and went into another shop. This shop's appearance was simple and didn't have any decorations. There were several brocade boxes on the counter, containing spirit tools, talismans, medicinal pills, and some miscellaneous items. The shopkeeper was a mortal woman. When she saw Mo Tiange, she greeted her enthusiastically, "Master Immortal, what do you want?" Mo Tiange was just strolling around, so she didn't answer immediately. She casually sized up the spirit tools on the counter before she turned to look at the woman. But when she turned her head, she was stunned. This woman was in her 20s and was quite beautiful. Although she was a mortal, she wasn't much worse than a female cultivator. Of course, this wasn't why Mo Tiange was surprised. What surprised her was that this woman looked so familiar. Mo Tiange carefully thought about it, but she couldn't remember when she saw this woman. "Master Immortal?" Mo Tiange regained her composure and saw the woman looking at her anxiously. She suddenly realized that she hadn't answered for a long time but had been staring at this woman for a long time. Moreover, she was now dressed like a man, so she must have scared this woman. Mo Tiange thought it wasn't convenient to explain, so she asked, "What do you sell in this shop?" Seeing that Mo Tiange's expression was normal, the woman promptly smiled and introduced, "Look at these spirit tools, talismans, and medicinal pills. They're all excellent. In addition, this shop also sells talisman paper and talisman brushes. They're all made of high-grade demonic beast materials. Please take a look. Mo Tiange had already swept her eyes over the things displayed on the shelves. The spirit tools were only common goods, they weren't high-grade spirit tools. The talismans were also low-grade talismans. She didn't know about the medicinal pills, but judging from the other things, they were probably just common medicinal pills. She just sold a lot of spirit tools, and she had a lot of talismans and medicinal pills on her, so she basically didn't need them. Thus, she casually grabbed a handful of talisman paper, a talisman brush, and some cinnabar. How many spirit stones do you have here? The woman looked at them, then said with a smile, these talisman papers and cinnabar only cost 1 spirit stone, but this talisman brush costs 7 spirit stones. For the current Mo Tiange, 8 spirit stones weren't much. She immediately took out 8 spirit stones from her Qingquan bag and placed them on the counter. The woman was very happy that a business deal was completed so easily. She wrapped up the things she wanted and handed them to Mo Tiange, then said respectfully, Master Immortal, these are the things you wanted. Mo Tiange took them and was about to leave, and a young cultivator came into the shop. This cultivator was only in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm. He wore ordinary clothes and looked exhausted, but his face was handsome and looked quite elegant. As soon as the young cultivator entered the shop, the woman who guarded the shop called out happily, Husband, you're early today. As it turned out, he was this woman's husband. This wasn't uncommon. Female cultivators were originally fewer than male cultivators, and many low-level female cultivators were taken as concubines by high-level cultivators. It was often very difficult for low-level male cultivators to find a Dao companion, so many of them married mortal women as their wives or concubines. Mo Tiange didn't know whether this beautiful woman in front of her was a wife or a concubine. The cultivator responded faintly with a very cold expression. Once he raised his head and saw Mo Tiange, he immediately smiled and said, Fellow Daoist, do you need anything? Mo Tiange naturally knew she was already in the top layer of the aura refining realm, so this cultivator didn't dare to look down on her. It was just that he was so cold to his wife, yet he greeted others with a smile, which made her a little unhappy. Especially when she turned her head and saw the faint loneliness in the woman's eyes, she felt even more sad. It was basically impossible for a mortal woman to get equal status with a cultivator. To put it nicely, they were wives and concubines, but to put it bluntly, they were playthings. So what if she was a female cultivator, let alone a mortal woman? She recalled Shenbing. She had good qualifications and had the backing of her family, but she was still dragged down by her beauty and became someone else's concubine. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange suddenly lost her mood and coldly said, It's nothing. The cultivator didn't care about her indifference and still said enthusiastically, Fellow Daoist, you can look around more. Everything else in my shop isn't good, but the talisman papers and talisman brushes are all good. I personally made them. Before Mo Tiange could say anything, the woman already said, Husband, this Master Immortal has bought talisman papers and talisman brushes in the shop. Really? The cultivator smiled awkwardly. That being the case, thank you for your patronage, fellow Daoist. Please make yourself at home. Mo Tiange nodded slightly, but she didn't want to leave. She pretended to be interested and started to examine the spirit tools on the shelves. The woman was about to introduce them, but Mo Tiange waved her hand and said, No need to greet me. If you like them, you'll tell me. Seeing that Mo Tiange didn't want to be disturbed, the woman retreated. Seeing her husband's tired appearance, she hurried back and forth to serve tea. Mo Tiange sighed inwardly. She really didn't understand. This cultivator obviously didn't treat his wife well, so why did this woman still love him so much? Husband, you came back so early today. Did everything go smoothly? Upon hearing his wife's question, the cultivator opened his eyes. He then took out a cloth bag from his Qingquan bag and threw it to the side. My luck was bad today, so I only managed to pick these. You can go and tidy them up." The woman nodded, then picked up the cloth bag and went inside. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange casually picked several talismans, paid several spirit stones and left. Chapter 74. When Mo Tiange washed her face in the evening, she suddenly understood why she felt that woman's face was familiar. After removing her disguise, her face in the mirror was clearly somewhat similar to that woman's. The similarities were in their eyebrows and facial contours. The facial contours were fine, but their eyebrows and eyes were too similar. If she hadn't disguised herself, she might have been discovered on the spot. It was strange. She didn't have any sisters, and the closest relatives were all in the secular world. It was impossible for Yi clan's people to still stay in Kunwu, right? Second uncle said that when he moved Yi clan to the secular world, he especially left a message that unless they had spiritual roots, they would never set foot in Kunwu again. This woman was a mortal, so she obviously didn't have spiritual roots. She stood in front of the mirror for a while, but she couldn't figure out why, so she returned to the bed and meditated. If she wanted to figure it out, she would go and ask her tomorrow. After reaching the peak stage of the aura refining realm, she discovered that the spiritual aura in her body had changed. She practiced 2 cultivation techniques. One was the art of Sunu, and the other was the greenwood art. Because the art of Sunu was faster, it was her main cultivation technique, while the greenwood art was her secondary cultivation technique. However, the spiritual aura absorbed by these 2 cultivation techniques was about the same. Although the greenwood art absorbed with spiritual aura, it also absorbed a small amount of other spiritual aura. The art of Sunu, on the other hand, could absorb any kind of spiritual aura. The spiritual aura absorbed by the 2 cultivation techniques was mixed together, so there was no difference. However, after reaching the peak stage of the aura refining realm, a wisp of Yin's spiritual aura gradually appeared in her body. It was very small, but it was very different from other spiritual auras. The 2 wisps of spiritual aura circulated in her meridians, neither interacting nor repelling each other. She didn't have time to tell second uncle about this, but it didn't seem harmful at the moment, so she just let it be. Now that she had reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm, cultivating couldn't increase her spiritual aura, it could only make her spiritual aura purer. Mo Tiange was just used to cultivating, so she would meditate when she had nothing to do. However, something surprising happened during her habitual cultivation this time. The 2 unrelated wisps of spiritual aura in her dantian and meridians were still circulating separately, but the wisp of Yin's spiritual aura gradually became more abundant. After discovering this phenomenon, she did an experiment. In her dantian, she separated the 2 types of spiritual aura into 2 strands and let them slowly come into contact with each other. As a result, not long after, the mixed spiritual aura of each attribute decreased a little, and the cool spiritual aura increased a little. Once she verified that this cool spiritual aura could nibble away at her original spiritual aura, she immediately stopped cultivating. Although she could control the 2 spiritual auras at the moment and there was no difference, she still hadn't figured out what was going on with this cold spiritual aura. It was best not to act rashly. After pondering for a while, she felt that this Yin spiritual aura might be Yin aura produced by cultivating the art of Sunu. However, the cultivation technique didn't mention this change, so she didn't dare to confirm it. Generally speaking, the sky was Yang, the earth was Yin, men were Yang, and women were Yin. Actually, both men and women had Yin and Yang in their bodies. It was just that men had more Yang and less Yin, while women had more Yin and less Yang. As a result, the cultivation techniques of the cultivation world were created specifically for female cultivators, and all of them leaned towards the Yin attribute. Since the art of Sunu could only be practiced by female cultivators with pure Yin constitution, it must be even more so. However, she had never heard that the spiritual aura produced by female cultivators was different from that of male cultivators, so she couldn't be sure whether this was Yin aura or not. The night passed very quickly. Mo Tiange packed her things and went out. Today was the opening day of the Tao conference jointly organized by the market square. On this day every month, the surrounding cultivators would flock to this place. Most of them were aura refining cultivators who yearned to enter Tiandao's sect. Occasionally, there were also foundation building cultivators who wanted to discuss Tao with Tiandao's sect's cultivators. Mo Tiange had already inquired about the location of the Daoist sanctum. After taking several detours, she directly walked towards an ordinary small courtyard. The gate of the small courtyard was open, and there were 2 low-level cultivators guarding the gate. Occasionally, people would come and hand over spirit stones in exchange for an identity tablet. Mo Tiange followed behind them, handed over 2 spirit stones, received a wooden identity tablet with a number engraved on it, and entered the small courtyard. Soon after, she passed through a central room and was led into another room. She then walked up a staircase leading to the underground. After making many turns and walking for a while, she finally entered a hall. This hall was enormous, not much smaller than Yunwu's sect's preaching palace. It could accommodate at least 1,000 people. The innermost part of the hall was a high platform with several praying mats on it. Below the platform, tables, chairs, and praying mats were all available. After listening to the receptionist's introduction, Mo Tiange finally learned that if one paid an extra spirit stone, they could sit on a chair. At that time, she simply didn't ask and only paid the admission fee, so she could only sit on a praying mat. In any case, she didn't care, so she found a corner that was neither too far nor too close to sit down and closed her eyes to rest. In fact, most people still sat on praying mats. 2 spirit stones per month was already quite a lot for individual cultivators. Ordinary aura refining disciples of Yunwu's sect only received 5 spirit stones per month. People entered the Daoist sanctum one after another. After a long time, the number of people gradually increased. When the hall was gradually full, Mo Tiange opened her eyes and observed her surroundings. There were quite a lot of people who came, but only 20% of the seats were empty. Among these people, some were loose cultivators dressed casually, some were disciples of small sects dressed in sect uniforms, and some were disciples of big clans with attendants. It seemed this Tao conference was very successful. Not only individual cultivators came, but even people from cultivation groups and clans were willing to come. This made her look forward to this Tao conference a bit more. There were still people coming in from the outside. It wasn't until the people who came occupied the 9th floor that the people gradually stopped coming. A quarter of an hour later, the hall's door was closed. At the same time, the small door at the innermost part of the hall opened, and several aura refining cultivators led a foundation building cultivator to the high platform. At the same time, all the aura refining cultivators in the hall stood up and saluted. Seeing this, Mo Tiange also followed the crowd. This foundation building cultivator was a man in his early 30s. He wore a light purple Daoist robe with white edges. His expression was calm and he looked a bit like an immortal. Mo Tiange couldn't sense which stage of the foundation building cultivator he was in. Unless low-level cultivators practiced some kind of secret technique, they wouldn't be able to sense the specific cultivation level of high-level cultivators. However, the lifespan of foundation building cultivators was between 300 to 400 years. This cultivator looked like he was only in his 30s, so his real age was probably less than 100 years old. Based on the average age of foundation building cultivators, he could be considered young. The foundation building cultivator sat down on a praying mat in the middle of the high platform. He glanced at the audience and said, "Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Wen Xiangdao from Tiandao sect. Today, I'll give a sermon to everyone. If any fellow Taoists want to come, you're also welcome." The man paused for a moment, then continued, "I think everyone has probably heard a lot about cultivation experiences. Why don't I tell everyone about my foundation building experience today?" Hearing this, Mo Tiange immediately became spirited. Originally, she was only interested in this kind of Tao conference organized by market squares. She didn't expect they'd talk about foundation building experiences. This was exactly what she wanted to hear the most right now. As for foundation building experiences, the martial uncles in Yunwu's sect who gave sermons also talked about them to aura refining disciples who were about to build their foundation. However, she didn't know how they compared to the foundation building cultivators in Tiandao's sect. She wasn't the only one who was excited, the others were even more excited. It must be known that individual cultivators rarely had the opportunity to hear about this kind of content. Although clans' descendants and disciples from small cultivation groups had the opportunity, this was a cultivator from Tiandao's sect, the number one cultivation group in the celestial pole. It was definitely different from what their seniors said. When Xiangdao paused for a moment as if he was thinking about how to start. After a while, he slowly said, I think everyone knows how aura refining cultivators build their foundation. First, they have to cultivate until they reach the peak of the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. Second, they have to take a foundation building pill. Then, they have to enter closed-door meditation for 1.5 years. If they succeed, they'll advance to the foundation building realm. If they fail, they'll remain in the aura refining realm. If they're relatively lucky, they'll enter the 11th layer of the aura refining realm. Now, I'll talk about my process and experiences in building my foundation. I have 3 spiritual roots and am very ordinary in Tiandao's sect. The cultivation technique I practice is also a very ordinary 5 elements cultivation technique. I was lucky enough to obtain a foundation building pill, and as a result, I succeeded in building my foundation on my first try. I think many of you are as ordinary as I am. Ordinary people like me have very little hope of building their foundation, but you're also hoping that your ancestors will be blessed with luck and you'll be able to enter the foundation building realm in one go. But what I want to tell you today is that building your foundation isn't just about luck. As we all know, spiritual roots affect the speed at which one absorbs spiritual aura, affects the effect of cultivation, and also affects the probability of advancing to the next realm. It can be said that people with few spiritual roots are more suitable for cultivation than those with mixed spiritual roots. Some people can advance to the next realm easily, while others have to struggle bitterly. Of course, you shouldn't be delusional enough to think that building your foundation has nothing to do with spiritual roots. That's impossible. However, as long as you have enough patience, you can still slightly shorten the distance between you and people with natural spiritual roots. Many cultivators, after cultivating until the peak of the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, are anxious to immediately advance to the next realm. In fact, there are still several factors that affect the success rate of building your foundation. One of them is the density of your spiritual aura. His last sentence surprised Mo Tiange. Density of spiritual aura? What does that mean? When Xiangdao went on to say, do you know what kind of changes will happen to your body after you build your foundation? He swept his gaze over everyone. As he expected, everyone was silent, so he continued, let me tell you something. If you build your foundation, your meridians will become wider, your dantian will become bigger, and the spiritual aura that originally flowed between your dantian and meridians will become liquid. This way, your body will have extra space to continue absorbing spiritual aura. By now, you should have already guessed what I'm going to say. Yes, if you stay in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm for a long time, your spiritual aura will become a bit purer, and it'll be very easy for you to achieve the condition of turning your spiritual aura into liquid. Mo Tiange had never heard of this theory before. Second uncle only told her that it would be difficult to build his foundation if time was too tight, but he never mentioned these reasons. Mo Tiange didn't know whether this theory was concluded by Tiandao's sect or not, but she immediately concentrated on recording everything in a jade slip. She planned to tell second uncle when she went back and let him judge whether it was the correct explanation. When Xiangdao talked non-stop for an hour before he finally finished explaining this part. He paused for a moment then started the next part. In addition, I also want to tell everyone that just because inner demons appear only in the core formation realm, you shouldn't ignore your mentality. You're right, inner demons indeed won't appear in the foundation building realm, but your mentality will affect your behavior and also affect your confidence. Don't ignore your mentality. A person with a stable mentality will start building his foundation in an orderly manner and will be able to calmly solve problems he encounters. This way, from another perspective, will also increase his chances of building his foundation. Chapter 75. Since no foundation building cultivators came to discuss Tao, the Tao meeting ended. Nevertheless, everyone was satisfied. On her way back, Mo Tiange was still thinking about what the Tian Dao sect cultivators said. In fact, there were only 2 points. One was to purify her spiritual aura as much as possible, and the second was to calm her mind so that she could easily meditate before building her foundation. Although Tian Dao sect's summary of foundation building experience wasn't limited to these 2 points, it was better than nothing. If she could gather more information about foundation building, she'd have more confidence in building her foundation. A calm mind was easy to handle. Mo Tiange originally came out to travel because she was pressed for time, so she was flustered. Presumably, she'd be fine after a while. The first question made her a bit embarrassed. Because the spiritual aura in her body had undergone a special change, she didn't dare to cultivate. She could only wait until she went back and asked second uncle. After returning to the inn full of worries, she suddenly remembered she hadn't asked about yesterday's matter. Just as she was about to go out, she suddenly saw a figure going upstairs, so she hurriedly went back to her room. It was a somewhat ear-piercing male voice with an oily tone that made people feel uncomfortable. "Today, we finally have a place to stay. We don't have to sleep in the open." Someone immediately said, "Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, you can stay in this room. It's comfortable." The oily male voice seemed to size up the room and said with satisfaction, "The inn in this small place isn't bad. All right, quickly choose and serve some good wine and dishes." Soon after, the waiter said, "Yes, yes. Master Immortals, please choose as you please." After that, she heard the sound of the door closing. They must have entered the room. Mo Tiange thought for a moment but didn't release her divine sense. The person she saw was the one called Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. He seemed to be Jiang Shanghang's cousin, Jiang Qingxian. Jiang Qingxian was really lucky. During the last foundation building pill test, people from Zisha's sect and fellow disciples from Yunwu's sect wanted to kill him, but he still managed to escape alive. Moreover, it was said that the current master of Mount Yunwu had already prepared everything for him to build his foundation. However, it was really strange. Why did Jiang Qingxian come out when he was about to build his foundation? She quietly opened the door. Seeing that there was no one in the corridor outside, she cast an illusory transformation technique and left the inn. She walked into the same shop as last time. The shopkeeper was still that beautiful mortal woman. Upon seeing her, she greeted her enthusiastically, "Immortal Master, what would you like to buy?" Mo Tiange took the form of an ordinary-looking youth. She lowered her voice and asked, "What do you have here?" His tone was quite unkind, but the woman didn't say anything. She continued to introduce enthusiastically, "Our shop has all kinds of ordinary things. The best are talisman paper and talisman brushes." "Oh. Let me have a look." The woman took out a pile of talisman papers and various colored talisman brushes and placed them on the counter. "Please feel free to take a look." Mo Tiange glanced at her then said calmly, "You don't seem to be that great." The woman still smiled and said, "Of course, it's nothing special. However, the craftsmanship of making talisman paper and talisman brush is passed down in my husband's family. I don't see such good quality and cheap goods in other shops. So, the things in your shop are very cheap." The woman said, "Immortal Master is not from here, right? A small shop like ours indeed can't compare to a big shop. We rely on low prices to keep a foothold. Otherwise, if everyone went to a big shop with a full range of goods and top-quality goods, our shop wouldn't be able to continue operating." Mo Tiange naturally understood this. Back then, she also opened a shop with her uncle. Their small shop couldn't compete with the big shops, but many small cultivators still came because they didn't have much money and couldn't afford to buy things from the big shops. The big shops also didn't bother to compete with the small shop for this small amount of money, so the small shop could survive. Later, they were bullied because second uncle was, after all, a foundation-building cultivator. He also had some wealth, so his collection was very complete. He also had some top-quality aura refining goods, so he began to compete with the big shops for customers. Mo Tiange pretended to be skeptical. Is that so? The woman said, Immortal Master, take a look. These talisman papers are made from a mixture of Wenxing bamboo and demonic beast blood. Wenxing bamboo is hard, so the paper it makes is airtight. It's not inferior to top-quality talisman papers. As for this talisman brush, it's made from the fur of a bloodfrost wolf. Each strand is carefully selected. All of these were hunted by my husband, so I guarantee they're genuine. Mo Tiange took a look, but for a moment, she didn't say whether she wanted it or not. Instead, she started to size up the other things in the shop. She pretended to be careless and asked, You said this is a craftsmanship passed down in your husband's family, so you're also from a cultivation clan. Why does your shop look so shabby? The woman's smile froze for a moment, but she immediately smiled and said, A small clan naturally can't open a big shop. Immortal Master, please take a look. If you need anything, just call me directly. As she spoke, Mo Tiange secretly sized her up many times. The more she looked, the more she felt they resembled each other. From her probing, she could tell that this husband and wife didn't have any backing. That being the case, she didn't care about a fifth layer aura refining cultivator. I have something to ask, madam. The woman was still smiling, so Mo Tiange asked, May I know madam's name? Once she said that, the woman suddenly looked nervous. She took a step back, and her face turned green and white. Mo Tiange smiled and said, Madam, don't be afraid. I don't have any ulterior motives. Although she explained it this way, she was now dressed like a man and was also a cultivator. It would be strange if the woman wasn't afraid if she suddenly asked for her name. Seeing that the woman was still hesitating, Mo Tiange released her spiritual aura pressure. The woman was only a mortal, so how could she withstand it? She retreated several steps and leaned against the wall. In the end, she gave in and said, My surname is Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. After a long time, she thought of another possibility and anxiously asked, Mo as in stranger? The woman nodded. Yes. Mo Tiange stared fixedly at her. Finally, she found some traces of the past on the woman's face. As it turned out, this woman wasn't a member of Yi clan, but rather the Mo clan where she lived for 10 years. Mo Tiange's expression was uncertain. In the end, she said tentatively, Tianxiao? The woman was shocked. She stared at Mo Tiange with great astonishment, both because of her name and because of the sudden change in her voice. Upon seeing her reaction, Mo Tiange knew she guessed correctly. After a long time, she finally calmed down. With a wave of her hand, she withdrew the shape-shifting technique and wiped off the disguise on her face. From the woman's shocked expression, Mo Tiange could tell that the two of them had similar appearances. The woman's face turned pale and then red. She was extremely excited. You're Tiange? Mo Tiange nodded and sighed. Tianxiao, I didn't expect we'd meet again. Mo Tianxiao covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her cheeks. After a long time, she suddenly threw herself at Mo Tiange. Tiange, is it really you? Mo Tiange supported her and said warmly, It's really me. Don't cry. It's not easy for us to meet again. You should be happy. Yes, yes. Mo Tianxiao hastily wiped the tears off her face and went to close the door. Wait a moment. I'll close the shop first. Let's talk in the back. Mo Tiange nodded, then closed her eyes to calm herself down. Although she wasn't as excited as Tianxiao, she was still very happy when she got the answer. Not long after she arrived in Kunwu, she followed second uncle to wander around. Gradually, she realized she couldn't go back and had to give up everything in the secular world. If there was anything she was reluctant to leave in that family, it would be Tianxiao. She also felt sad in silence, thinking she would never see Tianxiao again. But she never expected the two of them would meet again, and it would be like this. Mo Tiange followed Tianxiao back to the inner room and looked around. There was a small courtyard behind the house. It was very neat and tidy, but it could also be seen that they didn't have a good life. Mo Tianxiao, who had already wiped her tears, looked at Mo Tiange's appearance and said in amazement, "Tiange, why are you dressed like this?" Mo Tiange smiled bitterly. "It can't be helped. The cultivation world is the same as the secular world. It's more convenient to be a man. First, tell me, how did you come to Kunwu? And, you even married a cultivator." She still remembered that eldest aunt raised Tianxiao like a daughter from a noble family and wanted her to marry into a wealthy family. She also always thought Tianxiao would be like that. Mo Tianxiao smiled then sighed softly. As it turned out, when Mo Tiange was taken away by an immortal, Tianxiao learned about this world and was full of curiosity about it. When she was 16 years old, her family arranged a marriage for her to the young master of a rich family in Feiyin town. Tianxiao was originally very dissatisfied with this marriage because the young master she was going to marry was simply a hedonistic son of a rich family. He didn't like to study, didn't know how to do business, and liked to have illicit affairs. Her resistance was futile, so she secretly ran out of the Mo family's village. She unexpectedly ran into a passing cultivator. Because of their reverence for immortals and because Tianxiao vowed to never agree to the marriage, after the cultivator resolved the conflict, her family finally agreed to let them be. Soon after, the cultivator was about to leave the Mo family's village. Tianxiao, who originally yearned for the cultivation world very much, left with him. After listening to this, Mo Tiange was silent. Tianxiao wasn't a woman who meekly accepted adversity, so it wasn't strange for her to resist the marriage. What was strange was, how did Tianxiao become like this? She couldn't help but ask, "Was he good to you?" Tianxiao was lost in thought for a while before she said, "In the beginning, he treated me really well. We wandered in the secular world for several years before we arrived in Kunwu. His father was also a cultivator, but he died in an accident during a fight of magical powers. When we arrived in Kunwu, we relied on the craftsmanship passed down in his family to open a small shop here. Maybe it was because life was too dull, or maybe it was because cultivation was too difficult, but it gradually faded away." Although this was the case, Mo Tiange still didn't understand. Could a dull life turn Tianxiao into what she was today? She never thought this gentle woman would be the Tianxiao who loved to play and laugh in the past. Mo Tianxiao forced a smile and said, "Don't just talk about me. What about you? Your cultivation level is very high now, right? When you came yesterday, my husband said your cultivation level was much higher than his." Mo Tiange said, "I'm already in the peak stage of the aura refining realm, but I don't have a chance to build my foundation. This time, I came out to travel and see if there are any faded chances." She didn't tell the truth, not because she wanted to hide it from Tianxiao, but because she wanted to hide it from her husband. Right now, she still couldn't figure out that person, so it was better to be a bit more careful. Mo Tianxiao didn't really understand these things, so she asked, "Then how have you been all these years?" "When I left the Mo family's village, that person took me to find my second uncle. Later, I followed my second uncle and wandered everywhere. A few years ago, we finally settled down in a place and I also entered a cultivation group. Because my father left some things for me, I was lucky enough to cultivate to the peak stage of the aura refining realm." Mo Tiange roughly recounted her experiences in the past few years, skipping over some things that were hard to explain. To be honest, she didn't have a good impression of Tianxiao's husband, so there were a lot of things she didn't tell him. Tianxiao originally had a lively and jumpy personality, but now, she was so gentle and obedient, working hard to guard the small shop and humbling herself to entertain customers. If she hadn't confirmed that this was really Tianxiao, she wouldn't have believed it. However, Tianxiao's expression was so calm. Even though she felt wronged in her heart, she did it willingly. Mo Tiange didn't understand. Could love really change a person? Chapter 76. A voice came from outside. Soon after, the door leading to the shop was opened, and someone said tiredly, "Wife, why did you close the door?" Tianxiao hastily stood up. "Husband, Before she could say anything, the cultivator had already stepped into the main house. When he saw Mo Tiange, his expression changed. His gaze moved back and forth between the two of them, and anger appeared on his face. However, he was afraid of Mo Tiange's cultivation level, so he endured it. Mo Tiange knew he was thinking the wrong way, but Tianxiao already said, "Husband, do you remember I told you I have a younger sister who's also a cultivator?" The cultivator was stunned and looked puzzled. Tianxiao then said, "What a coincidence. Kunwu is so big, but we actually met." The meaning of her words was very clear. The cultivator's puzzled gaze fell on Mo Tiange. "You mean," Mo Tianxiao pulled Mo Tiange's hand and said with a smile, "This is my younger sister." Younger sister? He stared at the 10th layer aura refining cultivator in front of him. She really didn't look like a woman. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange took the initiative to salute him. "I'm Mo Tiange." The cultivator hastily returned the salute, but his gaze was still puzzled. Tianxiao explained, "Husband, Tiange only disguised herself as a man for convenience." "Oh, I see." When he regained his composure and looked at Mo Tiange again, a smile appeared on his face. "Please don't take offense at my rudeness just now. I'm Tianxiao's husband, Meng Sigui." Meng Sigui, this name was indeed elegant. Mo Tiange showed a faint smile. "I came too suddenly." Seeing that they were friendly, Mo Tianxiao felt relieved and said, "Husband, you can chat with Tiange for a while. I'm going to make 2 dishes." Meng Sigui nodded. Rest assured." Tianxiao then said to Mo Tiange, "I know you cultivators don't like to be involved in worldly affairs, but you probably haven't eaten your hometown's dishes for a long time. Why don't you eat with me today?" Mo Tiange naturally wouldn't refuse. "Of course, I also want to." Tianxiao smiled. "That's good. You can chat with your brother-in-law first. I'll be back soon." "Okay." Tianxiao went to the kitchen, leaving only the 2 of them in the main room. Meng Sigui said, "Fellow Daoist Mo, please take a seat." However, he didn't dare to call her name directly because her cultivation level was much higher than his. In front of her, he felt pressured. After the 2 of them sat down, Mo Tiange showed a faint smile and said, "Since brother-in-law and Tianxiao are husband and wife, we're family. There's no need to call me fellow Daoist, you can directly call me by my name." Although she still didn't trust Meng Sigui, she was still willing to get closer to him out of consideration for Tianxiao's feelings. Meng Sigui heaved a sigh of relief at these words. The difference between the 5th layer of the aura refining realm and the 10th layer was too big. Although he was indeed Mo Tiange's brother-in-law in name, he was still a bit worried. Mo Tiange didn't take him seriously at all. With these words, at the very least, he had a rough idea of how he should interact with the other party. In addition, his mind became active again. Tianxiao's younger sister has already reached the 10th layer of the aura refining realm at such a young age. Could it be that she has some kind of backer? If that was the case, if he could get her help, Meng Sigui smiled and said, "Since that's the case, I won't be polite." He paused for a moment then asked, "I didn't have time to ask just now, but Tiange, how did you 2 recognize each other?" Mo Tiange said, "When I came to your shop yesterday, I already had some suspicions, but I didn't dare to be sure. Today, I couldn't help but come again. In the end, when I asked, it turned out to be true. Speaking of which, even I can't believe it." Kunwu is so big, yet we actually met. Yesterday? Meng Sigui paused for a moment, then an astonished expression appeared on his face. So you're the one from yesterday. There were many customers in the shop these past 2 days, and Mo Tiange was disguised yesterday, so he didn't remember. Mo Tiange smiled and nodded. That's me. Meng Sigui shook his head. I really couldn't tell. If brother-in-law could tell, I'd cry. I've also put in a lot of effort to disguise myself as a man. It's more convenient to dress up as a man when we're outside. That's true. Meng Sigui nodded. People's hearts are sinister, so we should be more vigilant. Tianxiao usually stays behind to look after the shop. If the market square wasn't strictly managed, I wouldn't feel at ease. Based on what he said, he seemed to have some true feelings for Tianxiao, but Mo Tiange didn't know whether he was telling the truth or lying. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then said with a smile, "Brother-in-law, I heard from Tianxiao that you opened this shop because of your family's hereditary craftsmanship." Meng Sigui waved his hand with a smile. "It's just to make a living." He then sighed and said, "I don't have any other skills, my aptitude isn't good, and I don't have a clan to rely on. My path of cultivation is very difficult, so I can only let Tianxiao live with me through this kind of bitter life." "I'm really sorry for her." Mo Tiange comforted him. "Brother-in-law, why are you discouraged? You're still young, so there's always hope." Meng Sigui said, "I know what I'm doing. The shop's profits are meager, and I can't rest for even a day. I don't have time, and I don't have enough spirit stones. Compared to you, Tiange, I'm really too ashamed to show my face." Mo Tiange showed a faint smile. "It's also luck. In fact, my aptitude is also very poor." "Oh?" Meng Sigui was surprised. "Tiange, you're still young, but you're already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. How could you? I'm endowed with 5 spiritual roots." Can brother-in-law believe me? I just had some fated chances. As for building my foundation, to be honest, I don't have much hope. When Tianxiao came back, she saw the two of them chatting happily. They were both cultivators, so they naturally talked about cultivation. Meng Sigui had a lot of questions about cultivation that he couldn't figure out, so he brought them up to discuss. Mo Tiange saw that his words were pleasing to the eye, so she patiently told him about her experiences. Meng Sigui's comprehension was pretty good. He wasn't a stupid person. It seemed he was also troubled by his spiritual roots. Tianxiao returned to the main room with a plate of food and placed a small bowl of noodles in front of Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange was stunned. After a long time, she heaved a sigh of relief and said with a nostalgic expression, "Meat noodles." She remembered that when they went out as children, they always liked to order a bowl of meat noodles from the snack stalls in town. Eating one bowl wasn't enough, but because they wanted to save some space in their stomachs, they didn't dare to eat a second bowl. Mo Tianxiao looked at her and smiled. Her eyes were faintly shining. "It took me a long time to learn. Try it." She took a bite and nodded. "It's delicious. It's the same as before." In fact, she had long forgotten what meat noodles tasted like. The days in Mo family's village were too distant, so distant that she forgot to recall them. Gradually, she forgot some things. But she never forgot that feeling. Tianxiao, who gave her true love during her lonely days, was something she would remember for the rest of her life. After they finished eating and chatted for a while, Mo Tiange stood up and said goodbye. Mo Tianxiao complained, "Since you're just passing by, you might as well stay at my place." Mo Tiange smiled and shook her head. "You don't have enough space here, so I won't add to your troubles. How about you rest for a few days and go to an inn to talk?" Tianxiao hesitated for a moment before nodding. "That's fine. I understand." Before leaving, Mo Tiange took out a jade bottle from her Qingquan bag. "I don't need this bottle of medicinal pills anymore, so I'll give it to you." Tianxiao paused for a moment before firmly pushing it back. "Who do you think I am?" We're sisters. Since we met in a foreign place, we should naturally get together. There's no need to be so polite. Mo Tiange smiled and said, you'll know once you go back and ask your husband. I'm in the peak stage of the aura refining realm now, so these medicinal pills are already useless to me. I'm just giving them to you so they don't take up too much space. Even if you don't accept them, I still have to sell them. Why should I let others take advantage of me? Besides, it's just a bottle of medicinal pills. Why are you being so polite? Who do you think I am? Just accept it. Let me show you our sisterly affection. Tianxiao was finally moved. She said helplessly, all right, I can't outtalk you. Mo Tiange stuffed the jade bottle into her hand. I'll go first. There's only one inn in this town. Just go there and find me. By the way, the name I'm using now is Yi Xiao Tian. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.